stage, Justin. Let me pull up the rest of our friends, and we'll dive in. All right, we've got John, Vivek, Ben, Alex, and Justin so far. Got a few more people who I expect will be jumping in shortly, but welcome to Bitcoin Live, the Lightning Network. This is a free-form conversation with me, P, your host, and we're just going to dive in and really talk about whatever we want as it relates to the Lightning Network. This week, I want to focus on some of the amazing stuff that's happening at BitRefill. Justin, thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to start by just going around really quickly and giving a brief summary of who you are, what you're about, and we'll start there, and then we'll go back around. We'll do something else. And please don't be like super humble. Oh, I'm just a humble man or woman who just loves Bitcoin. All of you, everyone that's on the stage, are totally amazing. So if you try to undersell yourself, I'm going to call you out. John, would you like to start by who you are and what your relationship to the Lightning Network is?
So my name is John Carvalho. I've been in Bitcoin for about almost 9 years now. I work at BitRefill. Currently, I am heading up a stealth mode company that is making a number of Bitcoin products like apps and platforms and things like this. But we are definitely deep into using the cutting edge of Lightning Network capabilities. So I'm happy to be here.
Welcome. Thank you so much for joining. I ran up to you at BitBlock Boom and was like, hey, you should join this space. And you were very generous. And you said, fine. Then we high-fived a bunch. Vivek, give yourself a brief introduction, who you are, why you're amazing, and what you do for the Lightning Network.
Hi, my name is Vivek. I identify as, my pronouns are reptile lizard. I work at Blockstream on our Liquid team, really into shitcoining on Liquid, and also help Christian a little bit with Greenlight related activities. But yeah, that's about it.
Awesome. Vivek is also an incredible boon to this space and the Lightning spaces in general. He has helped me pull in a number of really awesome people like Rusty Russell and Christian and now Justin. So thank you, Vivek, for making that happen. John, it looks like you have your hand raised. The way this usually works is if you have something to say, you just scream it out into the void. And then...
No, I was just trying to high five you and I didn't realize it did that.
Oh, even better. All right, we're on the same page. I'll give you one back just because why not? There we go. Oh, that says Bitcoin Magazine. You just high-fived Bitcoin Magazine. Ben, also super fun to hang out with you at BitBlock Boom. Can you give us a high-level explanation of who you are and why you're amazing and why DLCs are going to change the world? Just 2 to 3 sentence answers.
I'm just a Bitcoiner that is a humble bit guy, and that's it. No, I'm kidding.
God fucking
I'm Ben the Carman, been working in Bitcoin for a few years now. At Surebit's doing DLC stuff, but lets you do Bitcoin Oracle contracts. And P invited me on at BitBlock. I'm going to come talk about it in regards to DLCs on Lightning.
Hey P, he's being humble. He's a professional bear hunter. He sends me blueberry bear fat every week. He's the supplier.
Yep.
Holla at me.
Yep.
My side gig.
Yep, agreed. All allowed, counselor. Alex Bosworth, can you give us who you are, what you're working on with regard to Lightning, and why you're totally awesome?
Hey, I'm Alex Bosworth. I work at Lightning Labs. I'm the Lightning infrastructure lead. I'm working at Lightning Labs for almost a few years now, and working with Lightning maybe 4 years. Made some projects like Yelts.org, HTLC.me. I came up with this idea, submarine swaps, which later turned into a project at Lightning Labs called Lightning Loop. And I work on also libraries for working with Lightning, and I work on helping L&D. L&D's a very popular Lightning implementation.
Love it. Thank you, sir. Renee, oh, you just joined us. Fantastic. Do you want to give us a brief explanation of who you are and why you're awesome?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Renee. I'm an independent Lightning Network researcher and developer. I've been co-authoring the book Mastering the Lightning Network, and I focus a lot of my research on pathfinding and routing questions on the Lightning Network, liquidity management, these kinds of things.
Love it. Justin, best for last. Give us your specs.
Hey, yeah, it's Justin from BitRefill. I'm a software engineer. I've been working there for 4 years. I've also been involved with Lightning since I joined BitRefill, and payment channels even longer since the now defunct 21 computer. It's just something I've been wanting to push, getting out Bitcoin to the masses.
Love it. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you're a hard person to get a hold of, so welcome. So again, this is a as all Twitter spaces are, this is a recorded space. It will eventually be turned into and released on the Bitcoin Live podcast feed that Bitcoin Magazine has going. So always want to make that disclaimer up front. We're just going to go through it and talk about really whatever we want to talk about. Shoot the shit, argue with each other, make up, whatever. So on that note, let's just dive in. Can you explain for the audience, Justin, what Bitrefill is and how it interacts with the Lightning Network?
Yeah, sure. I'm a dev. I'm not the best public speaker, but the best I can do is we are a marketplace where we sell products and services to people who have crypto or even want to get into crypto.
Got it.
Yes, I say we're in a unique position because we are an international company and we have no restrictions on, say, just servicing one set of customers or anything. And we were one of the first merchants to integrate Lightning, at least one of the first, like, for real money. I know Alex Bosworth was one of the ones that actually implemented YALs, I believe, before us. So we were the first, like, after him, that case.
Love it. John, you were for a while the CCO at Bitrefill, and I know you were able to accomplish some pretty amazing things there. Would you add anything to that description?
I think Justin's being a little modest for Bitrefill. Even from after leaving Bitrefill, and they've only become, stronger and, more relevant into the Bitcoin world. And so I would just add that, not only was Bitrefill early, but like what they're providing people with gift cards it really breaks a lot of barriers and borders for people in various ways across the world. And so I really got to see some really cool use cases about how people actually like use and rely on Bitcoin and also use and rely on gift cards. And then with the Lightning side, like I would say, at least for the first couple of years, Bitrefill played a pretty major role in spearheading, doing things like providing channel liquidity, selling channels to people, also like with integrations with partners. Bitrefill, while I was there, played a big role in helping Bitfinex add Lightning, which was the first major exchange to add Lightning. I think there's even other things that I'm forgetting, but I would say I definitely wouldn't want to undersell Bitrefill as a role. They helped show other companies and show up other companies what could be done with Lightning and how easy it could really be to add it. And before, there's still so many that don't have Lightning at all.
Yeah, I think Bitrefill has been instrumental in the growth of the Lightning Network and instrumental in the adoption of Lightning by various exchanges. And I think that can't be understated. Getting large exchanges to open Lightning channels and use those for settlement is huge. I know you have worked on that specifically. Yeah, it's a pretty amazing service. Props.
Yeah, that was a cool little detail. I did a lot of bragging for Bitrefill about this while I was there. The same thing, that little detail you mentioned. I think it's really cool that Bitrefill and Bitfinex settle in the background for Lightning channel. Oh, that was the other thing I wanted to mention. Bitrefill was also like very early in spearheading like the recklessness of things like zero confirmation channels and like oversized channels, like
Thor Turbo,
Wumbo channels. Yep, Turbo and Wumbo. Like that was all Bitrefill at first.
That's pretty incredible. In a second, Justin, I want to go back to you and talk about some of the technological challenges there and what you faced. But before that, Vivek, since you so artfully put it, can you describe for the audience what Wumbo channels are and what Turbo channels are and why they're useful or important?
It's been a while, but I want to say there was a limit to the channel capacity while we were in that reckless stage. Certain implementations agreed we've outgrown that reckless stage, so therefore the limitation was removed. But this was by default, and people could have adjusted the flags, so they could have been doing this before that was even allowed. It just wasn't like the defaults. And I guess Bitrefill has this product called Thor, and I'd actually like to hand this off to John because I think this might have been a product he focused on a lot there.
I definitely have to give credit to Justin because while I did my part in promoting Thor, it was not invented by me. The brand was not invented by me. It was like they had just started the idea right before I joined of the concept of Thor and selling channels to people. But turbo channels is just like the old word we use for zero confirmation channels. I believe it was Anton, I don't know how to say his last name, Kumaradsky or Anton K. He works on Simple Lightning Wallet, I think it's called. And he and one or two other guys like invented this concept of, it's like a little hack you can do to be able to create a channel that can be spent from without having to wait for confirmations. And it turns out this little interaction really allows like a much better user experience within like end user applications and like things like withdrawing from like accounts, things like this. So that Bitrefill, I don't think they have it currently. I think their Thor product has been simplified into one channel. Maybe Justin, you can correct me, but I don't know if you guys still do ZeroConf or if you still do Recharge or all of the Thor things that you used to have. But in general, they sell these channels, and in general, like the turbo channels was the instant channels, like instant open and instant spend, and then Wombo. We didn't have a word for it because we didn't sell those. We just opened them with partners and people that we were integrated with or doing business with on the Lightning Network. But Wombo just means, yeah, like Vivek said, like the larger channels than the spec currently was at the time.
Yep. And
there's also the with Wombo, there was like a limit you couldn't send payments bigger than a certain amount, like 0.4. So it was also part of that where we wanted to get rid of this limit because we sell gift cards up to $10,000. And for us, we had users that wanted to pay this, and there was no wallet as part of it. So we wanted to be the first ones to offer this. And the interesting thing is that while most nodes didn't support Wombo at the time, you couldn't open like Wombo channels to any node on the network. You could route payments up to the channels that existed at the time. So you could route up to 0.16 Bitcoin-ish in that time.
Yeah. That's so interesting. And I just want to say for the audience, we are talking about the Lightning Network. I realized I didn't say this at the top, which is a layer 2 technology on top of Bitcoin. So we will often use the terms on-chain transactions versus off-chain. And when we say that, we mean like on-chain being just using Bitcoin and waiting for confirmations. Whereas the Lightning Network, the way it works is you open channels between nodes, or rather, if you want to be a routing node, open channels between you and other nodes in the network. And then basically that allows you to not only send and receive payments from the other nodes that you have explicitly connected to, but the real magic of the Lightning Network is that not only is it built on top of this decentralized, censorship resistant, incredibly liquid market that is the Bitcoin network on layer 1, you can also route payments through it like a ping pong ball bouncing off of various paddles. That was a terrible analogy, but you can imagine like a spider web, and you can go through all of the nodes being the points at which the web connects. And when you want to interact with the Lightning Network, you don't have to be a routing node. You don't have to deal with any of the complications. There are wallets that you can fully self-custody your Bitcoin. They basically abstract away all the complications. So you can just download like a Breeze wallet or Wallet of Satoshi, though that one is custodial, or any other wallet. And as a consumer, you can use the Lightning Network very easily. So the stuff that we're talking about is a little bit more nuanced. We're going into technical details, but I don't want to give anybody the mistaken impression that you have to be tracking on all of the specific terms we're using in order to participate in and benefit from the Lightning Network. So just to recap, Wombo channels are initially, when Lightning first was developed, there was this thing, it was like #reckless on Twitter. And it was basically like a way of acknowledging, hey, we're building out this new framework that's going to change the world on top of Bitcoin. And there was a period where it was much more risky. And so that's what we mean when we say #reckless. Wombo channels were put in place to basically prevent people from putting too much Bitcoin into a specific channel as a little stopgap so that people didn't go crazy. You can disable it at any time. And then the turbo channels.
Just a quick note, you got that backwards. Wombo channels was enabling the larger channels.
Oh, I'm so sorry. You're absolutely right. Yes. Yeah. So previously it was not possible to open channels that were greater than 16 million sats, which is 0.16 Bitcoin. And then Wombo channels made it possible. So you could enable Wombo channels, and then you could, open larger channels, which is to say you could send larger amounts, or you could allow larger amounts to be routed through you in the Lightning Network. Would you add anything to that, Justin? Or anyone else, actually?
No, I think that's good. Yeah.
Cool. All right, let's keep going. Again, at any point, anyone who's on the stage, please feel free to jump in and add random comments or your thoughts. I want to hear all of it.
I want to bring up some history that I'm not sure many people actually know. When we started the Thor service, it wasn't actually built by me. I put it live into production, but the initial version was built by my coworker, Rompert. I don't know if any people here who knows who Rompert is. He built many of the early Lightning Explorer tools. And initially, his initial project for us was to build a liquidity service, and he built a simple demo. And we realized that when we put it live, we wanted a way to have users on mobile devices to pay for and open channels to their mobile device from us, from our node. And Anton and Robert Rompert, they actually created LNURL together for this purpose so that we could have an easy way for mobile phones to have channels open to them from us.
Very cool.
But yeah, it's interesting to see how from that initial idea it's jumped and morphed into something completely like different and many different possibilities and
Yeah, particularly in the last 6 months or so, like there's like an LNURL community now, and like they're adding more and more features to it and more things you can do with it. LNURL authentication has become pretty popular, and you can find it in some services. Like it's a really cool example of like how the Lightning or Bitcoin community, like regardless of specs or BIFs or these kinds of things, could still organize and still find ways to add things to Lightning that have nothing to do with the actual spec or base protocol.
But I find that interesting. Do you think? I know I listened to one of the previous spaces, and one of the discussions was on should something be deployed if it's not on the Lightning spec. And for us, like LNURL was something that was spec'd on a GitHub document, and we created it for a need for us, and we weren't going to wait. And we partnered with Anton to create this, and then it's all used from there. Should we have not done that or waited for the spec to complete? Or I'm wondering if anybody has any thoughts on that.
So Lisa is in the audience. Lisa, I'm trying to pull you up. I haven't yet, but I know that you have a lot of thoughts on this. In the meantime...
OP, by the way, I asked Rui from OpenNode if he wants to come up. Rui's pretty legit too.
Absolutely.
He technically has the first exit of a Lightning business. He had some like roulette game thing or something he sold. So hopefully he'll join us.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, please, if you're out there, please request to speak and pull you up. In the meantime, I think it's a great question. The question being, is it important to wait for a spec to be completed? And a spec just basically specifies how specific, Justin, you're going to have to correct me because it's terrible. Actually, you know what? I'm not even going to try it. Justin, can you describe exactly what a spec is?
It's something it's a specification for, I guess it's the longer version of the word, where how it explains how you can recreate the system being built like LNURL, or anybody can create it in another language, how to interact with it, all the rules around this. That's how I would explain it.
I think the subtlety would be like for the listeners, basically that like you always end up speccing somehow because you have to communicate your design to other people. But when we talk about specs and like protocol design with Bitcoin base layer and Lightning, it's a very different environment. Like Bitcoin spec, like you basically have to get everybody to agree with you on the dev side and everybody to agree with you on the node side once you've implemented the soft fork or the change. Like it requires like unanimous consensus. But with Lightning, you don't really need that compatibility. So you're going to see these like sub networks in Lightning or people doing things like how Bitrefill did with turbo channels and large channels, breaking what the spec would be because you don't actually need everything to be totally compatible. And so it's tricky because there are, and I think Blockstream is a good example, there are people within the Lightning Network making implementations that would like as much as possible to be spec'd to keep everybody on the same page and everything as compatible as possible. And then there are people on the other side that just want to like iterate and like and aggressively move forward and make products and things like this. And they move forward whether the spec cares or not. And so you have this kind of like both ends of the spectrum, and probably the answer should be somewhere in the middle, but that's like my best kind of overview of it.
Yeah, I think in our case, it was more of nobody saw this as a need to be done now. And for us, it was something we saw users would want. And we were trying to get other wallets to support it. We did build an open standard spec on this. So it's not something we built closed source. It just wasn't every implementation's priority tool or wallet to actually integrate with this right away.
And you are totally right. Today, zero confirmation channels still are not supported in spec. And so if you had waited for ZeroConf to be spec'd and actually be supported by all implementations, you just would not have it.
Yep. Once you iterate, you see in production live with users what is important and what needs further building upon to expand to the rest of the wallets, like a test bed, in my opinion.
Justin, could you walk through the process that you guys went through in terms of writing down how LNURL worked?
Yeah, it wasn't. I didn't actually build it myself. The spec, it was Anton and Rumpert. So we were on a Telegram channel and they were just bouncing ideas back and forth because we had the problem where we wanted users to be able to buy a channel from us and open it to their mobile phone. Nobody else was interested. Everyone had their own priorities. It wasn't like it wasn't something a ton of people wanted to do at the time. Like Lightning was barely used at all. And it's something we saw as a need where we want to sell this. We had users that wanted to pay us or receive money, and we were providing that service. So we created a spec. We published it on GitHub. Bitcoin Lightning Wallet published a version that supported it. We published a product. And then from there, we reached out to other wallets. Say, hey, would you be interested in integrating LNURL? So we asked Zap. We asked many different wallets. And the answer at the time for months, which was a bit frustrating, was that none of them wanted to integrate it. It was just like, we don't have time for it. Or maybe one of us could actually make a PR request and add it. That would be an option. But we don't have so many devs where I could spend so much time doing this. So that was like the flow where it started to become more organic, where people started to like what LNURL started to offer, and they had other features. So then gradually, wallets started adding this, and then it is where it is today, where it's pretty much supported by most of the popular Lightning wallets, at least the non-custodial. I wouldn't say many custodial exchanges.
Oh, it sounds like your audience for getting the spec implemented was really like the wallet writers, like the people who were making interfaces that users were going to interact with. So like the wallet level was the right level to get people to make it interoperable. Is that right?
Yes, true. But wouldn't you say it would be a bit different with zero conf channels? It's something to be done on the spec level. I know Rusty was writing up something for zero conf channels to add into the spec. I'm not too sure. You would probably know better.
Oh, I wasn't talking about zero conf channels. I was just asking about the LNURL stuff.
But did it go hand in hand? I guess you can separate it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the reason why we were doing LNURL is because we wanted to give users the zero conf user experience so they could scan the URL like when they were initiating it. And it was very much like a business development process on the tail end. So like first they made the spec with the LNURL and stuff. And then what would happen is, okay, we saw this for our users, but we don't have a wallet. And we have to point our users to some wallet. And so it became like a business development effort where I would go and talk to each wallet and try to see what kind of commitments I could get and like what kind of environment needed to be created to get them to support it. Because all we had was BLW at the time. It was the only one. And it was not the prettiest and most full featured wallet. So it was there was a little bit of apprehension, and people would have liked to see it in more wallets. And what ended up being the impetus to get a few more to add it was there was like the Bitcoin 2019 conference or something, and we were trying to basically do a promotion where we wanted to give away turbo channels to everybody so they could experience this user experience. And so we were able to get a couple more wallets to add support for it at that time.
Can you explain what like a zero conf? I think we're talking about like two different things. LNURL is one thing, and then these turbo channels seem like a different thing. Can you maybe explain like what a turbo channel is and like how that relates to LNURL stuff?
Turbo channel was just the word that Anton used to use for zero conf channels.
Okay, but what's a zero conf channel then?
Oh, I guess you're asking me to say for the audience because I assume you
go for it. I would love it if you would describe it again for the audience.
John, I don't know what that is. Can you explain to me? BD guy. Need some help.
A turbo channel or a zero conf channel is basically normally when you would open a channel, the normal way to behave would be you have to wait for a certain amount of confirmations before you'd actually be able to receive Bitcoin into that channel, that new Bitcoin, and before you'd actually be able to spend Bitcoin in the channel that was already on your side of the channel. And what in Bitrefill's kind of position, this is like an e-commerce thing. And people don't want to wait for things. Like they want things instantly. And so there was like a missing gap in Lightning where it was instant once it was ready, but the onboarding experience wasn't instant. And there were a lot of new people to bring into Lightning. So we had to address that user experience. And so the zero conf channel, what it does is since the user is like buying the channel from you and you are Bitrefill. Bitrefill is already a routing node. Bitrefill already has balances in many other channels. And so because we're opening the channel to you directly, we can actually already forward payments to other channels. And because we were selling the channels, we were actually receiving the payments for those channels out of band. So we didn't actually have to wait for it to be your Bitcoin in the channels. We could actually essentially sell you Bitrefill's Bitcoin, put it in a channel for you, and before the channel was ever confirmed by base layer, you would automatically have, Bitcoin you owned with your keys, and that if the channel, so you could close the channel if you want and wait for the
Well, you don't necessarily own it, right? If it's zero conf, you don't, from the perspective of the blockchain, you don't own it. From the perspective, the key here is that you have the custodial wallet. And so
right, I'm not done.
It's extending in the custodial wallet.
So you have to understand.
Until confirmed, at least, yeah.
Yeah, there's a little bit of game theory you have to apply, because what Alex is trying to basically say is it's trusted, or there are double spending situations here that could be done. And this is true, but the dynamic of that, this is a business selling channels. There's simply near zero incentive to behave that way, because you can't behave that way in any amount of quantity and any amount of significance, like at any moment. And if you do behave that way, you'd like instantly start creating a really bad reputation of selling channels, of selling anything as a merchant. And as a merchant, you're not a private entity. You're not just like some person on the network. You're like a public business. You could get arrested, you could get fined, you could lose all your business. So the incentives there are like extremely low for somebody to manipulate the user in any way.
That also speaks to why it's not like why there's been hesitance on the technical side, is that we want to be empowering people who are anonymous businesses, and we want to be giving people an assurance that they have like this. They don't have to go to the legal system. They may not have that option. I think that it's like a user interface. It's like a user interface enhancement. Like
putting
on the wallet side.
Putting zero confirmation spec support into the spec and in every single Lightning node, I would never say to make that the default behavior. All the idea is that if this were in the spec and everybody had it, it would not be like the issue of explaining on business development level or on a product level that this option is there and what the trade-offs are. It's only about the decision. It's not about whether it's even possible. Yeah.
This just sounds like the next generation's like RBF and CPFP fight.
But it's
actually very related.
Yeah, but it's an optional thing. You don't have to accept it.
There's also another aspect, which is sometimes you actually can have a zero-conf channel that is non-custodial. And the way that can work is that you're spending a pass spend that you know something about. The spec is overly constrictive, like it's overly prescriptive in how channels are treated as real, because maybe you do have some kind of relationship, and maybe it's a custodial relationship, or maybe it's a non-custodial relationship that's out of band, that's not known to the network. So in that case, I think the spec can be upgraded to allow for more flexibility there.
I don't think Bitrefill or Justin or I or anybody that's like really wanting zero-conf was ever or would ever try to imply that like on the spec level that it needed to be done in some sort of like suboptimal way. I think like for me, like trying to do business development with the protocol, like with protocol developers, is a very delicate situation. And so I would just say, look, you have a lot of demand for this user experience. If a better way to provide these user experiences, please do it, because I don't know. And this is the best we've got, and so we're using it.
Yeah, it's at the start. You start off with something, and if there's a way to do it non-custodial, I would totally support that and say use that instead of zero-conf channels.
I wanted to quickly go to Rui, not only to introduce himself, but OpenNode was the merchant for a lot of the Bitcoin 2019 related merchants, I guess other like cool things like arcade machines and whatnot. So I wanted to hear his thoughts on the Thor Turbo launch or the BD efforts that were there.
Hey, thanks for having me. So I'm Rui. I'm a founding engineer at OpenNode. As Vivek said, we powered a lot of the Bitcoin conference. We're on track to power a lot of merchants in El Salvador. And we've been a player in the Lightning space since we launched, actually. That was one of the main reasons we decided to launch OpenNode, was because basically no one was supporting Lightning on the payment processor side. And a lot of these payment processors still aren't. So we just decided to launch it, realized that just Bitcoin payments in general weren't really being tackled correctly. And we've been seeing a lot of growth. We just partnered with Substack. We have a lot of great partnerships in the works too. And just excited to be in this space. And that's mainly what I've been up to for the past 3 or so years.
Thank you so much for joining us on the stage.
You also sold a Lightning company, right?
Oh yeah. So I started this little project called lightningspin.com, and I ran it for a while. I think it was one of the first few Lightning apps a little bit after Alex's Y'alls.org. And yeah, saw a lot of success, but obviously I didn't want to be running technically what would be a casino online. So I decided to get rid of it very early on and sold it, which I guess would count as an exit, even though it was I guess a tiny amount of Bitcoin, but now it's appreciated quite a lot. But yeah, still not like a major exit as you would
One thing I want to
usually
just
call it.
It was the all Bitcoin exit, right?
Yeah, all Bitcoin. I'm still
amazing.
holding on to those coins.
I love it. I love it.
Nice.
One thing I just
So-
want to point out is that the thing that to me is so incredible about OpenNode, and I'm saying this, I know everyone on stage knows this, but basically it allows any entity, whether it's an individual or a larger company, to create a really smooth customer experience, which is to say they can pay you in fiat. And then you can, as I understand it, you can go in and basically, as the person who's selling the service, you can set a little slider. So it's, okay, how much of the money do you want to receive as the merchant in fiat versus Bitcoin? It supports a lot of different, that's basically it. And the thing that's so interesting to me about it is that you are not only providing this incredibly compelling service from a Bitcoin and Lightning perspective, but you're also undercutting traditional or the other payment methods that provide a similar service.
And the reason like we were able to do that is because Bitcoin, it's funny because a lot of people call us out because we're an intermediary, but the beautiful thing about Bitcoin is that you don't have to use us. Whereas in the traditional payment world, you do have to use all of those intermediaries if you want anyone to be able to pay you, which is why the base fee is set so high and there's not much getting around it. Whereas with Bitcoin, you can just accept your own payments if you really want to. You can use any other of these payment processors, and we have to compete based on what the value that we add. And yeah, so I think we've been trying really hard to, obviously we do have fiat off ramps if you don't want to hold on to your Bitcoin, but we've been trying to nudge our merchants to hold on to some of the Bitcoin they accept. So yeah, you can, if you want to set up, you can just keep 100% of your Bitcoin or could keep any percent of it, of your incoming funds in Bitcoin, or just a split between that and your fiat currency. And yeah, we've been seeing more and more people using that, and more, I guess, more relevant to the space. We've been seeing a lot of our regular, everyday, not Bitcoin Twitter merchants seeing more and more Lightning transactions, which is really excited because I think that really shows that more regular people outside of Bitcoin Twitter are starting to use these Lightning wallets, which is amazing for us because not only it is fast and cheap, but it also solves a bunch of other payment acceptance and Bitcoin issues. Yeah, we're really excited to see that.
I think, yeah, it's amazing. And I'm playing around with it. The user interface is beautiful. But correct me if I'm wrong.
Let's go back to the Thor Turbo channels. I want to hear what Rui thought because they were like the leading merchant provider at Bitcoin 2019.
I just want to ask one more thing though, which is that for a merchant who is currently using Stripe, am I correct in thinking that basically they can instead integrate with OpenNode, and then instead of paying whatever it is, 3% from Stripe, that's with a P, they can now basically pay 1% through OpenNode?
Yeah, you could definitely do that. The only downside is you can't accept cards, which is for the majority of merchants a very big drawback.
Got it. Okay.
Ideally, you'd use both.
Makes sense. Okay. Yeah, let's go back to turbo channels. What are your thoughts on the conversation that we were just having?
I wanted to add, to make another segue to that topic, I wanted to add what I think is an important distinction or perspective in contrast for Alex and Lisa, like on the spec side, which is I hope you guys realize that what BitRefill was trying to do, and what anybody trying to do promoting zero comp or wanting to be spec'd or such, what we were trying to do was not move people from doing things safely, waiting for confirmations, to doing things less safely and making compromises. We were actually trying to move people from custodial to doing something this way. We say, let's give people try to give them close to the custodial user experience as possible, but move them away from custody. And so we were trying
also,
to make
I was supporting that as well. So I think it's a great effort. And from the start, I thought we need more flexibility in what we can offer so that we can match what the user experiences need to be.
And the interesting thing is we're seeing a lot of the most popular wallets like Moon and Phoenix. They're doing the same thing. They're using zero-conf channels. So they took this idea and they ran with it. We were a bit early with it, but it's nice to see it still exists in some form.
I have to say my feeling was actually when Phoenix came in and used it, it gave it a lot of credibility, right? So there was this blog article that you made about zero-conf channels. And it was out there. I think it was on Anton's blog. I'm not sure anymore. But I think people were aware of this and you guys used it. But then Phoenix came around and they basically released their wallet and said, look, we can have this beautiful onboarding experience. And I think then a lot of people actually looked at it more closely and it became more spread. And I think that answers your question also a little bit. Because you initially asked Justin, should we have spec'd this out or was it okay that we tried this? And I think it was perfectly fine to try this. You were basically compliant to the protocol. You were offering people who were semi-custodial in this moment because they were buying something from you anyway with this nice onboarding experience. You were showcasing it. You were documenting it somehow in this blog article. And then people picked up on it. I just think there is a moment in time where developers have to think about and decide whether they want to specify something and formalize this so that everybody can use against this. And that, of course, does not have to hold true for any feature all the time. But I think in this particular case, it was a beautiful way of releasing this to the crowd.
It was the only way also, because in your example, what the advantage that Phoenix had and Async had is they were both ends. They were the implementation, they were the developers, and they had the application. And Bitrefill didn't have a wallet. So we were trying to create a user experience that we didn't control part of the flow of. And so that was a big challenge for us. And so when Phoenix showed the full kind of flow, they basically did what we wish we could have done at the time.
Yeah, that makes totally sense, John. And I think that also plays into the hand of why people start to take this more seriously at that moment in time, or why people actually saw the true power of it, where you guys were obviously hey, we've been telling this all the time. So but again, I think development needs this experimental phase. And also when you think about the spec process, there is a reason why you can't go to the spec and say, hey, I have a suggestion, please put this in there. And people are just oh yeah, let's wave this through, it's in there. But we have this assumption of saying, hey, there should be implementations already and people trying to experiment with this. So anything that goes into the spec anyway at some point in time has been implemented and tested independently by several implementations anyway. So I think in general, it's a good idea to experiment with features and start to do things.
I would say the same thing with dual-funded channels. Maybe LND doesn't find it a priority or some other implementation doesn't find it a priority. But if C-Lightning does it, I think they have. And they show that there is demand for it from the users and they have wallets integrating it, the rest will add it. It will happen eventually, in my opinion.
And for the sake of diplomacy, I want to mention another perspective, which is the idea that it's even a choice for somebody like Bitrefill to decide whether to spec something or not. It's not a real thing. When you protocol developers and professional open source developers, they assume that there are other people like them on these teams, and that's just not true. What you're basically suggesting is that the guy who just learned how to use Lightning and his job is actually just to make sure the company doesn't lose any Bitcoin and kind of get this into a gift card e-commerce platform, all of a sudden he's going to be making specs for protocols and submitting BIPs and things like this. That's not a real thing. So the ability for small or medium-sized businesses to interface with the protocol or even have the wherewithal to think, should we spec this? It's not actually reality.
There's also the example of BIP70, where in regular on-chain Bitcoin, merchants wanted a way to make a better user experience for people to pay on-chain. And so they pushed ahead governance and pushed ahead this kind of new model that would include TLS architecture to make sure that you're interacting with the right person. And I think that's the danger, why people maybe are wary of specs that come from business, including that at the implementation level. Because ultimately it turned out that Bitcoin Core had to do a lot of work to remove this feature because it just wasn't identified as being a good feature to have at the highest levels in the long run.
But isn't that a good thing? Agree. I mean, it was added and the community rejected it.
The community didn't reject it immediately. There was a lot of pushback that I can't pay my invoices at BitPay anymore because BitPay only accepts this
Yeah.
That's good.
I
Move to
remember all
another
this.
service. Move to
I
another
was there
service.
for all this. I remember how it unfolded, and what I'll say is there's a few major differences that need to be brought up here. One is base layer Bitcoin spec is not the same thing as Lightning spec. It's just not. Like, proposing a change to Bitcoin is not the same thing as proposing a change to law.
It wasn't really a change to the consensus layer. It was really just a wallet coordination.
Sure, but the issue there was the people doing it had poor reputation with respected people in the community. And then when they went to go show how they would use it, BitPay was using it to collect information. They were basically saying, instead of just using Bitcoin like being we're going to use this payment protocol to basically force people to give us information that we need. They weren't only doing it to have invoicing and have specified amounts. And furthermore, the way it was designed, it was like imaginary. Like, none of the things could actually be enforced into an actual invoice or an exact amount. So it was just mostly an informal behavior for forming information and collecting information. And so there was really it was not a very good design, and they didn't have a very good reputation to push the design, and they were doing this on the base layer. So it was just like things were stacked against them, you know?
Yeah,
but
I think it would have been better if it had
thing,
remained
right?
at the wallet level. If it had remained outside of Bitcoin Core, just something people could play around with, that would have been the right place for it to never proceed from.
Yeah, and
Or
now
to
things
be
like
fixed.
offers and LNURL and even AMP, these things are like the same thing essentially, but nobody's calling these people evil for trying to standardize invoicing on Lightning, but that's what happened with BitPay.
And in my opinion, I think they saw a need and they needed to fix partial payments or payments. Working with Berryfill, I see this all the time on multiple different networks. It's a pain. We have people paying partially over, paying like a year later. It's a mess. Having some open invoicing standard, I think, would be nice, but just the way they did it, it wasn't a great way. I think hopefully we find something else. The current format of sending to an address and the user can send any amount, it causes a lot of problems.
I think it's worth pointing out that invoices are standardized on Lightning. There's a standardized format for invoices on Lightning. It's called Bolt 11, and everyone uses it. There's different mechanisms on how to generate or get one, and there's different proposals for how to interact with them over what different transports, etc. But in general, the format for what a Lightning invoice looks like is and has been standardized, and as far as I know, is understood and well accepted by pretty much every Lightning implementation. And that's, I think, a very nice thing to have on Lightning, this standard format of what an invoice is and what fields it can include, and the fact that everyone understands what they look like and how they work makes Lightning work basically across every platform. So I think what we're trying to get at here is that standards are very important. The standards let different software talk to each other. It's what we create a base layer that then other people are able to build new and interesting kind of uses on top of. But having that basic layer of standardization across whatever layer that necessarily needs to be at is definitely something that I think everyone in the Lightning Network community can agree is an important thing to have.
All right, Bitcoiners, I want to tell you about our newest sponsor. This show is brought to you by Ledn.io. I have been super, super impressed with the guys over at Ledn. I've actually known the co-founders, Adam and Mauricio, for a very long time. I've had the pleasure to watch them build Ledn up from a tiny, tiny startup to now a super impressive institutional grade Bitcoin and crypto lender. Y'all, I'm so impressed with these guys. They are offering some of the best rates out there. I don't think anyone even comes close to touching them. You can get 6.1% APY on your first 2 Bitcoin that you deposit into Ledn interest accounts, and you can get 8.5% on USDC deposits. I mean, I know all the competitors. They're not even close. If you're going to put your crypto and your Bitcoin into an interest account, Ledn is by far the best. And on top of that, like I said, these guys are hardcore Bitcoiners, and they know the products and the services that Bitcoiners want and appreciate. They come up with B2X. It allows you to put your Bitcoin in, they leverage it up, and you can, with one click of the mouse, get twice the exposure to Bitcoin. So if you're super bullish, Ledn has you covered with a super, super easy way to get leverage with B2X. And then on top of that, they know that Bitcoiners care about your reserves. They know that Bitcoiners don't like under reserved and not full reserved financial institutions. So they are pushing the frontier in transparency in the digital asset lending space. And they are the first digital asset lender to do a full proof of reserves and proof of attestation through a Mariano LLC, a public accounting firm. So the Ledn guys, they know what Bitcoiners like. They are legit. I encourage you guys to check them out. Do your own research and go to ledn.io. That is LEDN.io and learn more. Bitcoiners, I want to tell you about the Deep Dive. The Deep Dive is Bitcoin Magazine's premium market intelligence newsletter. This is a no fluff, hard-hitting, incredible newsletter going deep into the market, helping you understand what's happening with derivatives, what's happening on-chain, what's happening in macro, what's happening with the narrative, and what's happening with the tech. My man, Dylan LeClaire, is an absolute savant. He is making his name known in the Bitcoin community, getting shout-outs left and right, getting on podcasts left and right, and him and his team are bringing you everything that you need to know about Bitcoin. You don't even have to be on Bitcoin Twitter. You can ignore every other newsletter. This is the newsletter to rule them all. Go over to members.bitcoinmagazine.com. Sign up today. And if you use promo code MACRO, you get a full month for free. You have nothing to lose. What are you waiting for? Sign up. See the incredible work that Dylan and his team are putting out. And if you don't like it, just unsubscribe. You don't pay a dime. But if you do, you know, it's going to be well worth the sats in investment in understanding Bitcoin and gaining the confidence to continue to invest in Bitcoin and making the right moves around Bitcoin. And it's going to be well worth every single Satoshi. Again, can't recommend it enough. That is members.bitcoinmagazine.com, promo code MACRO. Do it today.
So I want to transition us over to a slightly different topic. Oh,
hey, Ben.
Go ahead.
Hey, Ben. When you rudely hijacked the network with your Eclair implementation of PTLCs with ECD, adapter signatures, what were you thinking? What were you thinking, man? With these DLCs and these lightning channels and stuff, what was going on in that noggin?
I mean, that wasn't me. That was my coworker. So I
passing the buck.
Responsibility. But I mean, that was mostly just a test client to show proof of concept stuff. The way we did it was actually not totally secure and was somewhat trusted. But yeah, the idea was just to show the proof of concept, and there's no spec or anything like that.
So, Ben, I'd like to shift the topic slightly, which is to talk about DLCs over Lightning. So when we talk about DLCs, DLCs stands for discrete log contract. Can you give us a summary of exactly what a discrete log contract is and how people should think about it? And then, let's go through it. How far away are we from being able to effectively use DLCs on chain and then also use them over the Lightning Network? So to begin, brief summary of what a DLC is and why people should care about them.
And DLCs stands for discrete log contract. That also mostly means nothing to most people. The idea is to have basically a Bitcoin contract that is based off an oracle or set of oracles. So you can do like something like who's going to win the Super Bowl, and the oracle will sign, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers won the Super Bowl, and then you get your money based off that. Or you can do something like a lot fancier, like you're assigning the price of Apple stock, and then you can have Apple stock price exposure while on top of Bitcoin, whatever need to go through like an exchange or something like that. And these are something we've been working on for a few years now. They are usable today on chain. We have a wallet and everything that can do it, and we have support for multi-oracle and everything like that. So it is doable, but on Lightning, it's a little further away, where theoretically it's possible, but it requires re-architecting like LND or something. So it's not going to happen. And most likely it'll happen when we actually have PTLCs on Lightning, but that still could be years away as well.
And so and for the audience, HTLCs are what are currently used over the Lightning Network. They stand for hash time lock contract. PTLC stands for point time lock contract. Is that correct?
Yep.
And can you give us a brief, what is the difference between the two, and why are PTLCs important going forward?
So basically the difference is between a point and a hash. Basically when you have a hash, you can't tell like that the pre-image was related to it. So you can't do anything fancy with it. there's a point you're doing mathematical functions. You can tell, that this one is related to the previous one, and it lets you do fancy stuff with that. So basically, inside of that math, we can put in contract logic like our DLC.
Cool.
May I add to this for a second?
Please.
I think one of the really important things is that, let's assume you have two pre-images and you want to add them. You can do this, and you have the sum of the two pre-images. They are numbers. When you have the payment hashes that come from the pre-images and you add them, you don't get the same result as if you take the payment hash of the sum of the pre-images. And this is bad. This produces a lot of hassle in making cool protocols. Whereas when you use PTLCs, you have this property that you can basically add the secrets and you can add the points, and it doesn't matter. So in that sense, you can create escrow services, and you can create better ways of canceling payments that are already going out. And this creates a lot of great opportunities for us to improve the Lightning Network heavily. Also, I want to maybe add to the DLCs the way how I understand them, or why I think they are important or might be important, is there was this article in, I think, late 2018 by Zeman, who basically made the claim that on the Lightning Network, you want to have a single asset network because of the time lock contracts that we're using. And that's independent of whether we use PLTCs or HDLCs. We have this problem that it gives a free call option to the person who has to release the pre-image. They can basically decide whether they want to settle the contract or not. And if you have a different currency, they might have the chance for an arbitrage trade. So this is bad in general. But with DLCs, what you can do is you can basically create a contract for difference. So you can basically fix the exchange rate. So if somebody at a later point in time would settle the contract, you could basically remove this arbitrage opportunity that is being created. And I think this is a really great thing because people still want to use fiat currencies, but they might want to use Bitcoin as the transport layer in the Lightning Network. So what you can do is with a Bolt 12 offer, you can basically say, hey, I want to have a recurring payment with $5. But if we had DLCs, you wouldn't have this problem of how many Satoshis are these in the future and at what exact exchange rate is this Lightning payment going to settle. So I think there's a great opportunity for DLCs to improve the overall user experience on the Lightning Network.
Yeah, to add on to that, we have been reached out to people like Alex Gladstein, working with people down in El Salvador adopting Lightning, and there's definitely interest from what we call stable channels, where you have a channel that's a fixed USD cost instead of a Bitcoin balance. And yeah, so for us, if you're American making 50 to 100K a year, the 5% plus fluctuations in your Lightning channel of $100 isn't a huge deal. But if you're Salvador making $500 a month and your channel goes down by 5%, that could be humongous for you. So having stuff like that where they have a fixed USD cost and not totally exposed to price volatility would help them a lot, and there's interest.
Very cool. Yeah, I know that when we were early on in PlebNet, you and Nadav helped me create an oracle. We went to oracle.sharedbits.com, and then basically I created an oracle, which was just me basically determining whether who had won the PlebNet. And it was more of a joke because there was no specification around how are you deciding whether someone has won or not? And then we were going in and using the wallet to try to create a DLC so that me and Nadav could take a bet. But we never got around to the second part, but it was super fun. It's pretty amazing what you guys are building.
Yeah, I think it's fun. Our UX kind of sucks right now, but we're throwing out our current GUI and working on now trying to make a web app GUI similar to something you'd use on your Umbrel app, Ride the Lightning or Thunderhub, where you just have it running and then you just go to a website and make a lot prettier GUI. So it should be happening soon. It just takes time to build things.
Love it.
Some of these user flows, I've been talking to people in emerging markets who are trying to relate fiat balances using only Bitcoin. And some of the wallets have actually just been using Lightning's very fast settlement to just pretend like they're sending the dollar amount. Because if you have a US dollar balance for user A on service A, and then you pay the dollar amount to service B, and service B also retains the fiat dollar amount, they can do that conversion for the user behind the scenes, but they can settle using Bitcoin. So as long as they're like on the same page as far as what the exchange rate can be, that's something that we can actually start to see in a lot of these consumer wallets already.
Interesting. Very cool. Lisa, Reed, Justin, you've been fairly quiet. Do you have any thoughts? Anything you want to add? Questions?
I want to hear more about these channels that have a USD balance number.
I think it's pretty interesting to see how that's been growing. I use it myself. I use Strike all the time. If I don't want to sell my Bitcoin, I use Strike. If Strike went down or if I got banned, I have my own Bitcoin I can create channels with. I think it's really expanded how many people actually pay with Lightning, at least two of us, at least. I'm also interested to hear more.
And the idea behind it is like you would like set up a payment.
Ben, it's super hard to understand you. Is there any way you can produce a cleaner signal?
I lost my AirPods, so it might be that why that is. I don't know where they are.
No worries. Keep going. We'll do our best.
The general idea is that you create a channel between, so you start out with a channel between you and your counterparty, and you immediately set up a payment of like your entire channel balance. But your payment is a DLC of Bitcoin price. And with doing that, then you can, every time you make a payment, you just update that payment to be smaller and but still be a DLC. And if the other party doesn't cooperate, then you can go on chain to actually get your DLC payout, and you'll have like your USD again. And that's the general idea. It would require like some complexity on top, but basically you're just setting up a DLC and making a payment every time and re-updating that DLC to cooperatively close it into a new payment. Does that make sense?
Man, I have so many more questions. What if the value of the Bitcoin in the channel is less than the amount of the dollar value? Maybe this isn't the right place to ask these questions.
Yeah, I'm torn. I'm super interested as well, but go ahead, Ben. Go answer that one.
Ben, call a friend. This is Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Getting it all on the line.
Or can ask like someone.
Yeah.
So, you would need to like counterfund it, or where so say like we're doing like a 1 Bitcoin thing. So me and you would both put 1 Bitcoin into this channel, so you have dual funded channel to start out with. And then as long as the price goes down about 75%, you could get screwed. But the overall thing is you're getting the amount of Bitcoin back in dollars. You do need money from the other side to have the other half of if it goes down. If it goes up, then you're just giving the other party that.
I want to add a little dimension here and work it in two places. One, I want to ask Alex, I don't know if he's involved with this kind of thing, but I have talked to people at Lightning Labs and they've mentioned ideas of other ways to achieve, I don't know.
I was just going to say the colored coins.
That was my second thing, is I was going to say first we could talk about tokens and that as an abstraction as a way to help achieve this kind of thing. And there's a whole, fork of conversation that can go in. But also I think that Lightning Labs is mentioned, and I don't know if, I think it was like not described or mentioned what he was referring to, but I know that Lalu did a presentation in Austin recently. And he mentioned like some like ideas and plans around things like stable channels or other ways to like establish value in a channel. And I just wanted to give Alex a chance to say if there's anything aside from tokens or DLCs that Lightning Labs knows about or is interested in for establishing this kind of thing.
I just think there's a lot of ways to formulate the same thing. Like one way is using Oracle contingent kind of contracts. Another way is just using the same Lightning network that we have now, but instead of the Bitcoin chain, we just use another chain, which is like a pseudo chain. It contains dollar tokens. Then there's like other ideas, which are like, what if you want to be like a dollar liquidity provider? So somebody wants to say that I want to always have a stable US dollar balance, but of Bitcoin. It's like how BitMEX works. Like you have all of these positions in other assets, but everything you actually have is Bitcoin. So the idea would be like you would turn on your node and you would say, I'm willing to trade with peers who want to maintain their balance stable in US dollar. And then every time the price goes down, then I'm going to get more Bitcoin. Every time the price goes up, I'm going to give some Bitcoin to my peer. We're going to do this so frequently, so hyper fast, and that there's going to be minimized risk of somebody exit scamming, because they can only exit scam with however much the Bitcoin market price moves in a single instant. Like, I don't know that there's one master solution here. And I think that the other thing to think about is like the user layer, like how the user like deals with all of these caveats of, okay, you have to overfund, or okay, you have to choose a good oracle, or you have to choose a good peer. It would be a lot simpler if we just got rid of all the US dollar and then we just had Bitcoin. But I think that the motivator that's driving this a lot is the El Salvador like model is that you have US dollar and Bitcoin. And so people who are trying to make their wallets like in tune with that kind of model are saying, okay, how do we reformulate things so that we give users like that choice?
Hey, John, I got this little side chain thing. It's called Liquid, and there's this thing called Tether on it.
I thought I was about to have to do your job
for
for you. When is he going to talk about it?
Same here. I was going to ask.
It's all right. Vivek fell asleep. Wait. No, wait. That was a great explanation. Thanks, Alex, and thanks, Ben. I feel like continue.
Yeah, sorry, I did interrupt you a little bit, but please do tell us about Liquid and how you think Liquid would address these problems, as well as like Lightning Liquid concepts. And also, I'll add a question in there, which is: there's Liquid, there's Lightning on Liquid, but what about Liquid on Lightning?
Whoa! I mean, dang, John, you're getting ahead of me. I don't know this. Maybe we got to get you as BD. But anyways, so yeah, Liquid is a different trade-off versus Lightning. Lightning, you have the 2-2 multi-sig with a time lock, and essentially you have this funding multi-sig set up, and then you exchange commitment.
Did we lose him, or did I drop out?
No, I think we lost him.
I also forgot to mention the Chaumian Cash. It's possible to create like little mini banks that maintain US dollar balances, and that might even be just more efficient than creating like blockchains we don't really need.
Is someone working on that? Do you know any team or?
I've heard a lot of people like expressing interest and saying that this is like how it should be done. I've never seen any code that I can run. Like the only thing that I've seen that's closest to it is like Cloudflare actually created a Chaumian eCash implementation for their like bypass captchas. So you could like, yeah. So you could, when you're on ClearNet, you could go and make a lot of Cloudflare captcha solutions, and then you'd go on Tor, and they would use the privacy aspects of Chaumian Cash to say, okay, we don't know who created these bypass captcha tokens, but you got one, so you don't have to look at this on Tor.
Oh, that's nuts. Okay, and can you describe just for the audience what a Chaumian Mint or Chaumian Cash is?
Yeah, at the core, it's just a simplification of I have this asset that really the only person that matters is me. I have a bunch of dollars, or I have a vault full of gold, and a blockchain isn't going to override me if I decide that you can't have any of this. And so Chaumian Cash is, I'm going to give you this token, and you can come to me later and say, I want to give it to somebody else. And then I will say, okay, who's that other person? And I will give them, I'll basically change my database. It's just like a database. The big advantage, though, is that it has the cryptographic method to like obscure who is actually the owner. That's why Cloudflare is using it to say the people on ClearNet, we don't know if the people on ClearNet that they got this token, that they're the same person who came back to me later and said, oh, I have this token. There's no relationship. There's no like user accounts there. It's more of a blind signing that doesn't reveal like who is the owner.
Love it. Vivek,
the spook silenced my speech and censored my transactions.
We know it's really you talking right now.
What did Vitalik do? He like sent like a random block hash with like his picture or something. I got to do that now.
Please continue.
Anyways, yeah, so Liquid is interesting because it's an implementation of Elements. Elements is a fork of Bitcoin. It's also based on the UTXO model, has a lot of the script, except some newer things like opcat, opchecksig from Stack, stuff like that maybe traditionally shitcoiners would like for things like making an automated market maker, stuff like that. But ultimately, all the native asset issuance, stuff like that, is possible through RPCs. And someone can issue their own asset, for example, Bitfinex issuing Tether. And there is Liquid Tether that can be atomically swapped for a Liquid Bitcoin. And that is in existence today, and the blocks are just dying to have your transactions.
I love it. I have an ulterior motive, which is part of the reason I love having you and Lisa on here, is because I want to see more of that. I want to see it. I want to see greater adoption. I want to see that explored further by the community.
And what is the status with Lightning on Liquid?
So Christian Decker put out this really cool blog post back in, I want to say 2019, about Lightning channels on Liquid. Once again, because it's the UTXO system, it is possible today in Liquid Bitcoin on confidential channels. I think things get a little hairy for other assets. So a lot of people have talked to me. The holy grail is other Lightning channels on Liquid, but not to overstate it. But essentially that gets a little hairy because the fees are paid in Liquid Bitcoin. So there would need to be some re-architecturing done. Not saying it's impossible, but we need more devs focused on that. But just to sum it all up, John, confidential LBTC channels, they're ready to go. I see Grubel's in the audience. He'd be happy to open a channel with you. But the other cooler stuff for like your own assets, it'll take a little bit longer.
And now to clarify for the audience, when we talk about like channels in Liquid, we are talking about a separate Liquid network. It still works like in the same way, but it's not like incompatible with the other, like the core Lightning network.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like bootstrapping a whole nother Lightning network on the Liquid side chain. Not necessarily like in that sense that you have to do it, but there'd be other potential avenues to have them interoperate with atomic swaps. But once again, that means like someone would be running the Liquid node and the Bitcoin Core node plus a Lightning node on each.
Wait, I thought Fiat Jeff was working on a project to make a node that could talk to both normal Lightning channels and also Liquid channels, if that was a thing. I don't know where that is, but it's called like Triple C Lightning Liquid or something like that. Let me see if I can find the project. Does anyone else know about that? I really don't know much about it.
I haven't heard about it.
Yeah, Jeff,
never
there's
heard
a lot
of
of
it.
stuff, and I can't keep up.
Yeah, I was about to say, I've never heard about it. If you find this tweet, please throw it up here, Lisa.
Yeah, absolutely.
I will mention like a little thing that I've done a lot of thinking about this kind of thing, like tokens and abstractions in Lightning. And one thing I really learned, especially from participating in the RGB community and other ways that people want to get tokens on Lightning, like one thing you have to be realistic about is every asset, no matter how compatible it is with Lightning, this was hinted earlier by someone, but every single asset that you want to add into the mix, it's essentially a new network that you have to bootstrap, no matter how compatible or how spec it is. So if you want to go and say, you want to issue a token and you want it to be on a Lightning network, it actually it doesn't even matter whether it's the original Lightning network, a new Lightning network, a compatible Lightning network, how compatible, because you need other people that have that asset at least at your endpoint. Even if you want to do atomic swapping in the middle, you still need people that speak the language of the asset, are willing to have exposure to the price of that asset, and ultimately can render that asset at the end of the route. And so you just, no matter what you do, you're bootstrapping a new network when you add a new asset.
But again, I think DLCs might be part of the solution here, right? Because you could have nodes who actually support both currencies or both tokens, an asset and Bitcoin. And they could do the swap, and the exchange rate could be part of a DLC, so they don't have this risk of when the contracts are being settled.
I'm not speaking of the risk. I'm speaking of the actual liquidity.
No, I agree. But what I'm saying is you don't need to have... So, for example, let's say you and I are currently using the Lightning Network, and we also want to use a different asset, and we want to support this for our customers. We could still route through the Bitcoin network if we both are able to exchange the asset. That's what I'm saying. So,
right,
so we don't need
I think you're saying the same thing. I worded it as at least the endpoint would also have to support that asset.
Oh, yeah, sorry, you said this, but I didn't make the connection and catch it correctly. But I wanted to say one more thing. I see Native Cohn is in the audience too, because we discussed a lot of the DLC stuff and PTLCs, and I think he did some amazing work with this respect, and I don't know if we can put it up on the stage, and if you would accept.
Be amazing.
I didn't see you, Nadav.
Yeah.
It's great. I'm pulling you up now. Please accept the invitation and give us your thoughts. For those who don't know, while we wait for Nadav, he's an expert fencer, and one of the things he can do very well is the flunge, which is where you jump up above somebody and then you hit them from above their eye line with your fencing stick. And that's the technical term. Nadav, are you there? No response. All right, let's keep going while we wait for Nadav to accept the invitation.
But maybe one thing to note, the entire DLC stuff with respect to Lightning is also still very experimental and hard to pull off and implement. I think just today there was another Square grant given out to John Carcello, I think, who wants to actually work on bringing DLCs to Lightning. And I think it's going to be rather difficult because I think most DLC stuff needs some changes to the Lightning spec in order to make this natively in there. But I think Nadav, who is the speaker now, can say much more about that.
Yeah, it's a pretty big change. It requires, in particular, a change to the state machine and not the smallest possible one. It's not like we're just changing kind of what messages are being sent back and forth, but it also changes how many messages need to be sent back and forth when updating a Lightning channel. And it's quite tricky. I usually think of PTLCs as like an easier version of an update for Lightning channels that I always advocate for seeing and working on.
I forget what they're called, but essentially, you always show me this mailing list thing with you and Z-Man talking about. I guess it was like escrows in like automated escrows or something like that. I forgot what the appropriate term was again.
Oh, I can't tell if you're mixing two things or if, maybe I know. Barrier escrows, is that what you're talking about?
No, it's your favorite thing to talk about. I just forgot the name.
I see. Okay, yeah, it's not particularly Lightning related, but I think smart contracts on chain is what you're referencing. For anyone who doesn't know,
easy, Nadav.
Oh,
I'm
easy.
Kidding. I'm joking. Keep going. My humor is not coming across so far.
ZMN CPXJ has a little write-up called Smart Contracts Unchained from quite a while ago. I want to say 2019 or something, in which he just briefly goes over how to write contract code off-chain that then gets enforced on-chain via the use of some escrows, and you can execute pretty arbitrary stuff, and it is a pick-your-own federation model as opposed to, say, something like a sidechain where you're bound to whoever runs the sidechain when you're executing contracts on there.
Nadav, I'm a little bit lost. What is the problem that what you're describing, and can you repeat the term again, solves?
Yeah, so it's a proposal / write-up / idea called the Smart Contracts Unchained.
Okay. And what is the problem it aims to solve?
Yeah, Vivek kind of threw it out of the blue, but it solves, essentially, it lets you write arbitrary contracts on Bitcoin with the kind of drawback that some kind of mitigated trust is required, and it is the specific way of essentially using multisig or equivalent. So in Taproot, this could be just digital signature variants so that it doesn't actually show up on chain. But the goal is to have as mitigated a trust model as you can and still execute pretty arbitrary stuff pretty simply.
Okay, so I brought it up because essentially we're talking about assets being represented, whether it's on chain, on a side chain, or Lightning, or a DLC. The drive chain folks will start harassing our DM soon, and even state chains later, or even channel factories if we get any prev out. Like, I'm curious, what are the trade-offs for each? And if I don't know who's the most knowledgeable or potentially on either one of them, but it'd be great to take a high level, I guess, understanding like what do we need people to agree on? Is it worth agreeing on this thing if it's like a trusted asset or whatever? And what are the bootstrapping issues? But I see a lot of different potential solutions for assets that are somehow associated with Bitcoin. Why do you say harassing, drive chain harassing your DMs?
Welcome to the stage, Marshall.
Reach out. We need to ask. You don't even make blocks, Vivek. They're harassing me. Come on.
So for those who don't know, Marshall Long is a hardcore miner in the great state of Texas and a fantastic troll and a dear friend, even though we've only met in person once. Marshall, please continue.
Yeah, it's interesting. We talked a lot about this at Satoshi Roundtable, because the other thing is the developers are great at what they do,
they're just really bad at campaigning for themselves. Jeremy just pushed Jeremy Roman. Forget it. Yeah. It's cool, and miners in general would back it. But, like, he's been working on it for 3 years, and the first time I heard about it was when he invited me as Studio Roundtable. So I don't know to flag for stuff if I'm not following all the issues on GitHub. So
not following all the issues on GitHub. So I think that's the first thing I would say is Nadav and Ben and Renee and Alex, y'all need to do a lot better at just talking to people to get people to back your stuff. It's really not that hard to get stuff committed in core if you get miners to signal it. That's it. Like, it's less political and more like very obviously just, hey, look, here's what people like objectively want by shoving stuff in their Coinbase. Simple as that. I don't know. That's just my take on it.
Marshall is saying that's one reason that I like Lightning is that we don't have to really worry too much about consensus changes. Consensus changes are very dangerous. So I'm pretty.
I'm not saying for consensus changes, right? If what you want to do necessarily I don't know if DriveChain has consensus changes. Taproot doesn't necessarily, right? Or it's like super political, right? Like you got to get Peter on your team. You got to get like Adam on your team. It's just like a hot mess of bullshit, in my opinion.
Because he promotes it so hard and he makes it seem like a very personal thing. And so there's always this, he's going to trigger everybody's like sixth sense, Schneider sense about why does this guy want this so bad? You want changes to Bitcoin, particularly the base layer, to be based off of like wide demand, obvious like consensus that people can measure in their own lives, in their own ways. And if you try to do things like make it something that you do through miners or make it something that you do through political lobbying to core, this is just all a false reality of how it works. And if it does start to work that way, it's basically portraying the problem with Bitcoin and Bitcoin is centralized. It's
in a different way.
We absolutely need the consensus to be predictable. If there's any kind of
I agree.
It's a total nightmare.
I'm not advocating for anything but that. Let me just put it a different way. John, when was the last time you talked to a very large Bitcoin miner about anything? Like not even code changes, just like in general.
Give me one reason why I should.
Because they're community members. Like, who gives a fuck what you're talking about? That's what I'm saying. It's not like miners are
there to provide blocks. That's all they're there for. Consensus-compatible blocks. They serve no other purpose.
Okay, so you don't like just like talking to people. You just want to be like an introvert in your closet banging out code. That's cool if you do. I'm just saying.
Think about how you look right now. Like I'm literally in a spaces providing useful information to a lot of people that want to hear it. And you're making these weird claims.
No, I'm just saying I've talked to other core devs at great length about a lot of things. Ben, Nadav, about all kinds of stuff, like not mining related. Like they've helped me a lot.
You didn't ask me if I talk to core devs. You asked me if I talk to miners. I have absolutely no need to talk to miners.
Yeah, saying in general, this is a great way to just talk to the community, right? About just whatever.
Wait, Marshall.
I'm not saying I don't want to talk to people who are miners. I'm not like a
That's what I thought you were saying. I was like, what the fuck, man?
No, I'm saying miners as a role, they don't have a voice on the protocol level. If miners are also Bitcoiners and they also matter as people, as businesses, as entities.
Great.
But as far as like the consensus role, they have no part in it.
No, yeah, I agree. Their role is to enforce
compatible blocks. That's it.
And a consensus compatible block is what everybody else agrees to. Like in order to be on the
so everybody running a node enforces that. They say, okay, are these blocks compatible with
right? But if miners aren't running your flavor, right? Let's say you want to do a Taproot transaction. Like perfect example, within the first week of Taproot activating, probably very few Taproot transactions are going to go through because most pool devs are really bad. And they're just going to take time to upgrade. So it's like a perfect example of, in theory, people agreed.
Marshall, wait, sorry.
Everybody's running the same flavor.
You came in super hot. What is the specific like issue that you are asking John about? It's unclear to me.
Well, I honestly, I was reading something when he first started talking, but I think what he was saying was like talking about things like DriveChain and CTV and the upcoming soft forks.
Yeah, what's the way to, I don't know, maybe just those things out in the open? That's like my question.
Like the people making those things and the way they're promoting them, they have never been promoting like better and more clearly and more professionally than ever in the history of Bitcoin. There's a website for every soft fork made by the person. There's a website. This even is happening with Rusty Russell's doing this now with his things like for Lightning. So, and there's like any private website. There's a utxos.org website. You can learn all of the positive side about these forks from the people that want them the most. But these upcoming forks, they have there's a lot more like little political stuff going on with them. And so I think you have to be careful creating this culture of making it seem like whatever the next soft forks on docket are, that they will assume to get in at all. Like we always have to assume nothing. What we want is to assume that Bitcoin won't change and that it's extremely hard to change. We want to maintain that because that means only necessary changes will get in.
Yeah, I have to agree with that.
Like Taproot itself is an evolution of another software proposal that wanted to do similar functionality, but it took time for people to figure out like here's how we really want to get it in.
And so now so this won't be soon either, and that creates another dynamic for the people that want things badly. For example, the kind of unspoken order at the moment is any prev-out soft fork is next, but Jeremy Rubin is now promoting CTV, and he's trying to see if he can get any prev-out not only bumped, but just dropped, because he says that you can do like things like L2 even better with CTV. And so now you've got this kind of like horse trading, rearranging of priorities going on all because of one guy. And this is just not how things are done.
John, I will UASF for not having op CTV. I'm an any prev-out guy. I want any prev-out next, and I'm okay with ossification after that. But that's my opinion, not affiliated with Blockstream or whatever, but just me as an individual node runner. And I think that's what I want to highlight. Once again, this is like an individual thing based on whoever's operating these nodes. And there are dangers even with UASFs. It's pretty reckless because there's layer 2s now on that base chain too. So things will get messy.
And just for everyone else,
in general, people need to respect that there's a risk with UASF as well. It's not an activation method we want to have to lean on.
Oh God, is that actually a topic of discussion again? I guess Bitcoin politics just go full circle, huh?
That's hopefully the way it always will be. You want Bitcoin to stay safe.
Yeah, no doubt, man. It's cool though, man. There's a lot of cool stuff being built. Sorry, Nifty, go ahead.
I just thought the stuff that went through. So like Taproot got activated using something called like speedy trial, and this is like going back to like mechanics of like how the layer 1 talking about layer 1 upgrades now get rolled out. And I'm gonna be honest, I like really did not pay super close attention to all of the politics and discussion in the dev community that went around the process for how we were going to signal this like soft fork upgrade for Taproot. But it was like a lot of discussions. I like went to one IRC chat and then of course like forgot to put the rest of them on my calendar and missed them. But one of my coworkers,
you're a terrible
Russell,
Nifty.
I'm super terrible. Fine, you can kick me out, but I'm holding on to my coin.
So. Wait. So I have a request for all of us. Yeah. This is not, you've been better at this than certainly than me during this conversation. Can we start defining the terms we're using for those of us that are not on stage?
Yes. Is there a term in particular?
No, I was just thinking like USAF. We've been mentioning it, throwing it around, and I think probably 20% of the audience knows exactly what that means. So just going forward as we continue.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, I'm going to go ahead and finish my thought and then we can maybe explain what USAFs are. But I think Rusty had very strong opinions about how the upgrade signaling mechanism needed to be. I think he wrote a blog post on it. I'm not going to attempt to exactly get his like ideas out because I don't really remember them, but I do remember like the point of why he was so adamant about needing to do the process he was recommending for Taproot, and that was that it was to become like right now as it stands, Bitcoin doesn't have, for better or for worse, Bitcoin doesn't have a process for running soft fork updates. Like every time we've done one, it's been activated. And my understanding is that they've been activated in like a different process. So the fact that there's not like this canonical, like well-known process for getting an upgrade through means that every soft fork proposal and upgrade, we have to go back to the drawing board and renegotiate how exactly it's going to get activated. And Rusty's hope was that we would be able to solve that, like not once and for all, but solve it in the general sense with the Taproot upgrade. But we didn't my understanding is that the speedy trial was an avoidance of needing to do that. And so by running the speedy trial and having it be successful, like, yeah, that's great. It makes Taproot is happening. It's going to happen in November. We're all super excited about it. Like, super kudos to everyone that worked on getting all of the miners updated such that Taproot, the speedy trial, would be successful and all that. That was all like great work and stuff. But in terms of like legacy and creating a standard and like a well-known and understood process that every like new soft fork would have to, like, what gauntlet would have to run through, it didn't do that. And so this like lack of a standardized way of upgrading the chain, it seems like going to continue to haunt Bitcoin soft fork updates into the future.
That's a good follow-up. I have a question actually that maybe some of you could answer. How does Linux negotiate like kernel updates? From my knowledge, it's literally just Linus saying yes. Is there like a predefined way that they do that?
Oh man, you know who is? Rusty could talk to this. Rusty is not here. Rusty is on a very different time zone. But that would probably be, honestly, I think that was Marshall who answered that question.
It's not a consensus protocol, though. It's just like the non sequitur to consider like what they're doing.
Look, man, like almost the entire world's internet runs on Linux. If you make a big bad mistake on kernel, the whole thing is fucked.
Wait, hold on. But like Linus is famous. One of my favorite quotes of his is somebody was complaining about some unilateral decision he made, and his response was, "Your pathetic bleedings are harshing my mellow." So it's definitely not a consensus mechanism. It's basically him deciding what's going to happen, and then...
Is that still how it is? That was basically my question.
It doesn't. The point is, it doesn't actually matter, because with Linux, you can have everybody running different versions. You can't do that with Bitcoin. And so that the difference is that everybody has to run it. And so consensus is unanimous. You can't have people on different versions.
We're gonna sync or thrive together.
I wanted to add a little like dimension for Lisa, what she was mentioning, wanting there to be a standard for, upgrades or changes. Like, you have to remember that there actually is a standard, and it's very simple. You run a node that has the rules that you want to enforce. When people talk about soft fork activation and things like this, they're not talking about necessarily a standard for getting something activated formally. They're actually talking about a standard for adding some sort of predictability or safety to the method. And so the problem with creating a standard for activating soft forks in Bitcoin is you basically start formalizing a governance structure around Bitcoin. And the more formal the governance structure becomes around Bitcoin, the easier Bitcoin becomes like for capture. And so you have to be really careful with standardizing things for changing Bitcoin beyond run the node that has the rules that you want. And so if you start, and so the risk is supposed to be that if you run different rules, that you may be incompatible and either get forked off or create transactions that either don't get accepted or don't get processed the way you expect. And so that's a good thing. We want the standard to just be that individual.
Yeah, but I think that like at some level it's okay. We have a new feature. Like, what is the code in the Bitcoin software that like makes this like that defines the rules for deciding whether enough nodes are running it? This is like
that's what I'm saying is that's not actually how it works.
Yeah,
there is no rule or like it has to be everybody.
But but I think that you're conflating two things here. I think you're conflating who's running the software with like how does the software signal that what rules it's necessarily like supporting, so to speak. And there's like several different proposals about how the software should do that as a signaling mechanism, which is like definitely one
But signaling is not a real thing either. It's just a signal. It's not actually reliable.
Wait, go ahead, Lisa. What were you gonna say?
Oh, I was gonna say it's one step removed from the process of like who's running what software and what is that software doing. But it's like, in general, is there a way that like we can set up the software such that when there is a feature we want to be adopted, here's how you signal for it? Like, that is definitely something that you could do in Bitcoin, and it would not change the mechanics of the current, whatever you call it, the fact that people get to run software and signal. It doesn't change that. All it does is it canonicalizes it, standardizes it inside of Bitcoin itself as like a way that you like would flag it on and off for new features. So basically, anytime that there's a new feature that comes up, we don't have to like figure out how the software for like different people, what the like way that people are going to signal it exists in the software. It'll be there, it'll be an option, but the rules will be like well defined, and like the goalposts for that are well defined. such that you can run the same race every time instead of having to sit down and organize what the race is going to look like and who the players are and like where they live every time you want a soft fork update.
There was a lot of effort.
We do have a couple of things like that. Like you mentioned, flagging. And when I'm running an older version of Core and there's a newer version that's communicating with me, I have a little error message at the top, the software, if I'm running the GUI version, that tells me that there's something going on, that like there's people are signaling something. I forget what the message is, but it basically tells me there's a newer version. And so if you want to signal and actually you're aware of how this works, you can look at what the signaling is, and you can see that there's another version that's going on that's not yours. But like beyond that, like the signals can be Sybil attack, the signals could be lies. And so they're not really worth something other than like how well you can even vet all nodes are real people.
So I think
that
Nadav,
part of the point though is just that like the problem of activating software changes is independent of the software to a very large extent. And it is just a problem that like is not currently, there's no consensus solution to the problem of upgrading software. And I think that's the problem that people like Rusty want a solution to.
I don't want my message to be that I'm saying I wish it were. If there's some way to make the signal clearer, I would be open to it. But I am definitely concerned with like improving the governance in Bitcoin.
What I'm hearing, John, just my takeaway is that you hate freedom and Christmas and the children.
I hate miners. I hate freedom. I hate people.
So wait. All joking aside, I do want to bring us back around to the Lightning Network. I actually forget what we were talking about before we went down, and I do find this very interesting. But what were we talking about before we went down the rabbit hole of user-activated soft forks and the challenges that we face around governance? Does anybody remember? Or does anyone on stage have a specific Lightning-related topic that they're excited about that they would like to nominate as the next topic we dive into?
I have one. I wanted to ask Lisa on how the progress has been and how there's been any usage of her liquidity ads. Because from my perspective, when we launched Store, we first saw there being something to replace this that many different nodes on the network would provide.
Yeah, I think I don't have a dashboard set up, so I'm not like actively monitoring them. I think there's like a handful of them. I've talked to a few people that have used them. Everyone who's been able to use them and get liquidity have been like super excited and happy about how easy the process was and how straightforward and simple it's been to do it. There have been a few bugs, which like experimental sort of beta stuff. I guess this is like our beta period, so I'm working on getting a few kinks out on it. But like everyone who's been able to use it and set it up successfully has been really happy about it. The use hasn't been super widespread yet. I'm wondering if that's because like in the blog post that I like talk about how to set them up, if you set it up like using some of the first instructions that I give, if you like restart your node, they'll go away. You have to like actually put it in your configs to get your advertisement, to persist. The other reason it's like hard to track and have like good metrics on is that it's like super decentralized. So unless someone's opening like a lease channel with me personally, or they tell me that they've done it, I have no idea how many people have actually been able to open channels with it, which is the point. Which sucks. Like this is like the not great part about building decentralized protocols is you're like, some people seem to be using it, I think. Like I've heard reports of it, but
I just want to take one step back and just define for everybody else. When we're talking about liquidity ads, there are three primary implementations of the Lightning protocol, and they aim to be interoperable with each other. And there's basically LND, which is currently the most popular one. It's used by the most nodes. And then there's C Lightning, which Lisa works on at Blockstream. And then there's also Eclair, which is another one. And then there's some other ones that everybody's really excited about that are based in the Rust programming language. So when we talk about liquidity ads, we're talking about ways of opening what are called dual funded Lightning channels. Because right now, when at the, I don't want to say the protocol level, but if you're using any of the default tools that are out there, when you open a channel, if I open a Lightning channel to Lisa's node, then, and if I'm the one that opens the channel, to start, all of the liquidity is on my side because I am the one who has put up and locked up the on-chain Bitcoin into the channel. And there are ways of, because when you're running a Lightning node, if you're trying to be a routing node, and only if you're trying to be a routing node, which is to say support the network, allow others to send payments through you, you need to, or ideally, you have a certain amount of liquidity on both sides of the channel, because if you max out on one side or the other, then payments cannot be effectively routed through one side of that channel. And so
inbound liquidity is so important. Inbound
Totally.
liquidity. I just had a great blog post on this a few weeks ago. So if you're interested in like the problem of inbound liquidity and how liquidity ads solves it, we just put it up on the Blockstream engineering blog post.
not enough. Can you add it to the top of the space?
Yeah, I can definitely do that. Actually, I'm gonna add it, and then I'm gonna hop off here soon. I would love to talk about liquidity ads more, but
Go for it.
I'll put the thing
No, go for it. We'll circle back around and talk about balances to check.
Yeah, I also want to be maybe a little controversial. I have a post that I scheduled to send out tomorrow on my Chainfill Substack. It's about a topic that I think would be interesting and maybe a little fun to talk about next week. If you're gonna invite me back, P.
Always, you're always welcome.
It looks like they posted it. I don't want to preview it too much, but I think it would be fun to talk about. Totally like.
Wait. So just to be
totally
clear, you're saying
Yeah.
you're about to publish an awesome blog post that none of us can read yet, but we should talk
Yeah,
about it
that's
next
right.
week. Okay, got it.
We should definitely talk about it next week, and you guys should all subscribe to my Substack to get first access.
Chill.
To the
Hey,
post.
kick her off stage.
I
This is
really
enough.
did that. It's true.
Get out of here.
But yeah, but it's not about spec stuff. But I would be curious to hear what people have to say about it. Yeah. Okay. And I'm gonna leave with that. All right. Seems like I'm getting booted. Great chat, everyone. It was great to talk to you all.
Lisa, thank you so much for joining us.
Bye.
Adios.
Bitcoiners, let's take a break from the content, and I want to tell you about Coolbix. Coolbix is an awesome Bitcoin hardware wallet that's been around for a really long time. They are building an amazing Bitcoin wallet called the Cool Wallet Pro. The Cool Wallet Pro is state-of-the-art Bitcoin hardware wallet technology. Its form factor is like a credit card. You can put it into your wallet, and it is designed to go with you on the go. So that way, even when you're on the go, you can have the benefit of a two-factor hardware wallet design when you're trying to spend your Bitcoin. So you can have your Bitcoin wallet UX on your phone and make it really easy to scan, decide what you want to do, but then you sign with a CoolBitX, which is in your back pocket. It is tamper-proof, it is waterproof, it is flexible, it has an awesome secure element in it. And it is a really awesome way in order to have some more flexibility, yet security when you're taking your Bitcoin on the go. I personally am a fan of, this idea of making Bitcoin into a medium of exchange and making it into something that people use. I know it's going to take time, but they are working on the UX for making that possible in as secure a way possible. So have some peace of mind. Check out the Cool Wallet Pro from Coolbix. And yeah, thank you to them for sponsoring this podcast. Bitcoiners, I am so excited to tell you about the Bitcoin 2022 conference. You guys, Bitcoin 2021 was absolutely a smash hit success. It was over 13,000 Bitcoiners coming together, breaking the barriers on who can come together and celebrate freedom, celebrate Bitcoin, and the energy was absolutely electric. Unfortunately, it was just oversubscribed. There's just people flowing out everywhere. And this year we are making the conference bigger and better. We are moving over to the Miami Beach Convention Center, and we are going to be throwing a massive 4-day festival for Bitcoin, celebrating Bitcoin, bringing together the greatest minds in Bitcoin and the greatest businesses in Bitcoin. And lastly, the culture of Bitcoin all together. We have a 4-day extravaganza planned for you guys for Bitcoin 2022. Day one is going to be Industry Day. It is a day where you can buy a special ticket in order to just mingle and make business deals happen. Day 2 and 3 is going to be a full-blown Bitcoin conference. This is our main conference. This is going to be on April 7th and 8th. And then lastly, we have the Sound Music Festival, Day 4. Imagine going to Coachella, but for Bitcoin. There's going to be very few talks. It's going to be all about the culture of Bitcoin. It's going to be all about hanging with your fellow plebs. It is going to be an absolutely amazing time. There's going to be Bitcoin musicians, Bitcoin artists, and all your favorite Bitcoiners, and just an amazing environment to party and just see it all, soak it all in, and to get people to realize that a Bitcoin world, a world filled with Bitcoin people doing Bitcoin things, is the world that they want to live in. That's what Bitcoin 2022 is all about. That is what the Bitcoin conference is all about. That's what Bitcoin Magazine is all about. So It is going to be a celebration of Bitcoin, the Bitcoiners, and this amazing movement that is going to make the world a better place. Go to b.tc/conference, learn more about the Bitcoin conference, learn more about all the amazing things that are happening in Miami around the Bitcoin conference, and buy your tickets. And guess what? If you buy your tickets with Bitcoin, you save $100 on all the tickets and $1,000 on the whale pass. So if you want the VIP pass, the big kahuna, if you buy with Bitcoin, you save $1,000. That's a lot of sats. So go and do it right now today. Don't wait. Prices are only going up. This is going to be a can't miss event.
So anyway, we're talking about liquidity.
It should be noted that with the remote balance, that like it doesn't mean that you can route if you have remote balance arbitrarily. Like maybe that node is not connected to anybody. It's like an involved subject of more than that.
I'm not sure if I cut out or if you did, but I think I got the gist. Yeah, I totally agree. It is not as simple as just having inbound liquidity, which again, for everybody else, is basically nodes opening channels to you effectively. Rather, it's even too much of an oversimplification. But basically, in order to route effectively, you need to have liquidity, that is to say, on-chain Bitcoin locked up in a Lightning channel on both sides, so that people can route bidirectionally through you, or one way or the other.
If traffic is flowing bidirectionally, you need to have like capital needs to be placed in Lightning in directions that in the future traffic is going to want to go.
Ooh, yeah, that's a great clarification. Yes.
Right, but when you have different nodes offering this ability to you can buy liquidity, you can make decisions based off like different heuristics. I don't think just opening from one node is the future. You just have a network of participants.
Oh, totally.
I wanted to segue this in for what I think is somewhat needed that we don't have currently. It'd be nice if like many different implementations had a built-in swap feature where you can swap on-chain liquidity, off-chain to on-chain, just like from different nodes, because having it like
they do have this function. All you have to do is just go to the node and move all of the balance over to the other side, and then close the channel, and you pay the fees like a lot of people do with Bitrefill. They actually just open up a big channel to the node that they want to have inbound liquidity from, and then they buy a bunch of stuff on Bitrefill, and now they have not only do they have Bitrefill gift cards and stuff, they also have all this inbound liquidity that they can use for routing.
Yeah, I think there are definitely there's definitely a lot of ways of.
Well, they can spend it arbitrarily. People are spending all around, but I think that's like a benefit that people are thinking about when they're spending on Lightning. If they're a routing node, they're thinking not only am I, getting the stuff that I'm buying on Lightning, but I'm also getting this inbound liquidity that like improves my node if it in a task.
But I'm thinking more of you have off-chain like funds and you want to pay something on-chain. You want to have more than just a loop to be able to send the money out.
Yeah, there's definitely. I think it's a great point. I think that there are definitely many ways of creating the same effect. Bitrefill is one of them, but also I certainly, whenever I'm trying to increase the amount that I have in, and again, once splicing is in place, that will dramatically change the terrain in this regard. But if you're just trying to shift the balance around, there's also tricks you can use, like sending funds to your Strike wallet or to your Lightning, to your wallet of Satoshi, or opening a channel to full or to loop, and then they drain you, and then liquidity comes back through other channels. There's different ways of doing it, but maybe I'm misunderstanding.
And there's also bolts. Like Loop isn't the only game in town as far as submarine swaps go. Bolts is open source. Anybody can run one of those servers, and I also publish my own submarine swap server. It's fully open source. So there's lots of possibilities. I think I actually was probably the first person to create channels that you can buy. Like I added this to yalls.org/about. I think it was before like Bitrefill even started doing it.
It was.
And this is something that like I think is a important tool, but I think that like it's important to like think about the distinction between liquidity and the channel construct. Like the channel is more of like an ongoing relationship, whereas the liquidity is something that is moving around all the time. We want that to not just be there like on day one. We want that to be really moving so that like it's representing like commerce that's happening.
Yeah, and I think. Go ahead.
Sorry, I want to emphasize on a lot of the points that Alex made, because I think they are heavily underlooked, and I fully agree with them, actually. It really makes it from whom you get the inbound liquidity. And what I don't understand is, I would argue the market would to some degree resolve this naturally, right? So, for example, if you are a shop and you're going to receive a lot of Bitcoin, people might open channels with you because they see there is an opportunity for routing. Right? I'm not saying this is completely happening without any interference and that we don't need any swapping and looping and rebalancing services. But I think there is actually a pretty good chance that people are smart, node operators are smart, and they will understand where to provide liquidity and where it's needed.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. That's how Loop itself even works. Loop doesn't invent inbound liquidity from thin air. The Loop inbound liquidity is actually other people recognizing a need to assign capital in that direction, because Loop has no way, like Loop doesn't buy channels. Loop is just out there and being a source where traffic is flowing, and all the people in the network are responding to it and setting their prices based on what they think that it's worth it to them to forward to Loop.
But it's not a marketplace. Like for us, we're a big service.
It's totally a marketplace. It's 100% marketplace.
Well,
because who are you paying? Who are you paying the fees to? You're paying the fees. The fees of Loop are maybe only 10% going to the Loop service itself. 90% of the fees that are paid out by people who use Loop are being paid to the routing nodes. And the routing nodes is anybody who can sign up and peer with Loop. And you don't even really have to peer with Loop, and you don't even have to use the Loop service to like benefit from this inbound liquidity trade, because maybe somebody sets up their own swap service. Because liquidity is fungible, somebody can set up their own swap service, and then you pay more maybe to use that other swap service. But then what's going to happen is they're just going to go to Loop and say, okay, I'm going to buy liquidity there so that my service still has liquidity. So it is a market. It's one big market of liquidity. And that's like how we're helping to assign where capital is.
Right, but I'm saying more about expanding on that, where we have like different nodes and they're gossiping, advertising that they offer this service. So it isn't just Loop, because we've tried using your service, and to be honest,
we do have other services. Like, and the point is also that like the reason that people have difficulty using a service is not that there's only one service. The reason is because it's like we have pathfinding challenges that we need to overcome, and we have liquidity assignment challenges we have to overcome. It's not that there's only one loop, because there isn't. There's many loops, and the people you're paying are many different people.
Yeah, but it's also that, but more, one of the issues we had with Loop was you kept closing the liquidity. Maybe other participants would want to keep liquidity open.
I think you're thinking about the way to use Loop wrong. Nobody should actually directly peer with Loop unless you're trying to sell liquidity. And we've always, from the start, we've said that we don't want to be a routing node. We don't, like, Lightning Labs doesn't want to operate a routing node in the network at all. What we want to operate is
you're a black hole to Lightning Sats, which is great because you can jack up those fees and Loop will just.
Yeah, but I would say that model doesn't work so well. We don't find enough liquidity looping out.
Wait, hold on.
We can definitely do better from the perspective of the clients, but like I can see it from the server perspective that for a lot of people it is working very well. And it's the reason that you would have problems is because it's working so well that it's oversubscribed. That there's not just like this super easy path to get to Loop now, because so many people are using Loop that they're just, and you can look at it on chain. There's websites where you can see like the channels. We've closed probably 1,300 channels, a lot of channels. And the reason that we're closing these channels is because just like they get used up. People are just using the service a lot.
Wait, sorry. When you say channels,
I want to add a little dimension to this here, because I think maybe what Justin is trying to convey is that you have to actually be a destination of Lightning, of Bitcoin, to actually have an economic role within the routing network. And so if you are an actual endpoint, if you are an actual destination for Bitcoin, you're literally always inserting yourself in between the economics. So to be a routing node that is just a pure routing node or just purely Loop, you're always going to be in a situation where you're just always getting tapped out or tapping somebody out. But if you're a destination, you are actually a place that people frequently want to transact with. And that's what Lightning is, for frequent transactions. And so you're always going to be like entirely dominated by hubs by basically businesses that deal a lot in Lightning that also act as routing nodes. So something like Bitfinex, something like Bitrefill, something like Blue Wallet or such. Like these are actual endpoint destinations. And in the cases of wallets,
that's not how it's going to work.
Originations.
That's not how it is working, and that's not how it will work.
Wait, hold on.
I would say, like,
what does that mean?
I would say async as well. They're another popular destination, and inbound and outbound. They provide a swapping service. Wouldn't it be better if it was all on a shared network that was Gossip advertising this service?
I mean, Gossip is not like inserting Gossip doesn't mean that you're decentralized. It actually means that you're unscalable, because Gossip networks like don't really work well if everybody is costlessly messaging like all of their economic traffic.
So
but you're advertising that I provide a service and nodes can pick, say, Loop first. If it doesn't work, I can pick async. If it doesn't work, I can pick something else. It's not saying Loop is bad. It's saying
Like I guarantee you, if Bitrefill ran Loop and Pool, that it would work better and be more successful than the current state.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to say. I want it to be additive.
Well, I mean,
not just limited.
Bitrefill does have. They were first to the market with a channel sale service. So I wouldn't say that. So it doesn't make sense to me that it's saying that there's only one, game in town. There's lots of games in town, and all the routing nodes.
I didn't say there's only one game in town. I said in order to have a long-standing, you have to be a destination to actually be an efficient, long-standing source of liquidity and frequency of transactions.
Wait, hold on. I want to just jump in and offer an opinion, and then I'd love to, Renee, you just raised your hand, and I want to give you an opportunity to speak. So, John, it's possible I'm misunderstanding what you're saying, but I certainly, I run a relatively small Lightning node, and I find managing my liquidity, it's like the most exciting real-time strategy game I've ever played because there's real sats on the line. And part of that involves figuring out new strategies, strategizing with other people that I'm friends with, trying out new things, creating super nodes, it not working. Marshall, who was here earlier, we did a whole experiment. We were like messing around. And then there was a period where basically like selling liquidity to Loop was incredibly profitable. And then everybody else caught on, and basically that became less profitable. There's a period where you could set your fees at 5,000 BPM and they would just drain you every freaking time. So that was great. And then now there's new, what I would call like vampire nodes that will basically just suck you dry. And so it's always this game of trying to like figure out who is.
But that's what I'm saying is like the game is just an inefficiency. And yes, there will always be some money to be made. But it'll get less and less over time for sure. But it will become automated and it will become dominated by actual hubs, basically.
Got it.
And so I guess one thing I haven't
conjecture, but there's no proof that will happen.
There's no proof it will happen another way, and so the idea here is I'm using.
But that's not the way it's.
I'm using like just like an economic approach. I'm saying, look, if there's going to be frequent transacting, it's going to be real transactions of people actually buying stuff and spending Bitcoin. And I think it'll
probably be mostly rebalancing. I think actually the most transactions on Lightning will not be related to any merchant activity.
Okay, wait, Renee, you had your hand raised.
That makes no sense.
But we'll come back around, John. But Renee, I do want to give you an opportunity to speak.
So one thing that I still don't fully understand, and maybe Alex, you can clarify this. You said before that there's alternatives to Loop, which is basically just rebalance your own channel and then close one of your channels. So what I don't understand is why are
that's not what Loop does. Loop is not about channel closing. It's about sustaining the life of a channel.
Oh, no, I understand. But the point is that people want to basically get some of their Lightning liquidity out to an on-chain transaction, to an on-chain output. That's why they're using the Loop server. That's why you need so much inbound liquidity, right? People send Lightning to the Loop
not
server.
Really. Right? That's a function of it, but the main use case for Loop that is popular is people want inbound liquidity. They have a set of nodes, and the nodes, they want a certain balance with their nodes, and they use the Loop as an API to say, I'm going to set the balance to be what I want it to be.
Okay, I understand.
Can I hop in really quick and point out something I think everybody is missing in what Justin said? Like, Alex, the big point that you made here is with a Loop server, you're constantly winding up with all the liquidity on your end and having to constantly cycle through channels. So wouldn't distributing that as a service that anybody could flag on like liquidity ads alleviate that problem? You can still, in aggregate, meet the same level of volume demand without stressing each individual node so much, because as long as you can get them,
it creates less stress, because the stress is really in consideration of the chain fees. So the more that you split it up, the more on-chain transactions that you create.
I agree in essence with that, but I still think there'd be other participants that can put more liquidity and keep it in the node so that they can process more money out. Maybe Loop can be that one.
If I can have a really big channel and I can splice with it, like I have everything I need. Like I have a really big channel with a really major hub who's well connected with other major hubs. I'm pretty much always going to have successful routing and very simplistic at that.
Right.
I think you'll just be disappointed. I think you'll be disappointed if you think that's all that's necessary.
If I'm trying to pay people that aren't in that route, then yeah, I would be disappointed. But the idea here is that I'm trying to be connected to people I actually frequently transact with. Yeah, I'm not trying to optimize how much routing I can do.
The whole premise of the whole premise of the Lightning Network, the reason that we have these HTLCs is predicated on the idea that you can't just connect to everybody directly or even semi-directly. then you need to create this exponential like network of people where you have many possibilities of how it's going to work. And in order to have this exponential growth, you need to have people in the middle who are relaying.
Yeah, my argument is simply that the people in the middle that I want to be involved with are actual endpoints as well, not just pure routing nodes.
Because of specialization, it's unlikely that will happen.
You broke up. I didn't hear you.
Because it's a specialized task that routing is different from doing merchant tasks, it's unlikely that those people will be the same people. But who knows?
Well, these aren't just merchants I'm talking about. I'm abstracting it to hubs, which could be wallets, which would definitely have like a wallet provider providing a server node, especially once LM desegregates the keys from the server. Like they're going to have thousands and thousands of users all connected to one thing, especially if they start selling channels to them directly, et cetera, and acting as a routing node.
All right.
It's possible. It's totally possible. But it's also possible that we say like merchants are obsolete now because we have peer-to-peer merchants. Like like specialization will play out in the market, and we don't know how it will work out.
My friends, we are nearing the end of this space. Can you each kind of articulate your beliefs or your position in like several sentences, and then we can wrap things up and close it out for the night? Alex, why don't you start? Can you just, in terms of this specific idea, what's your position here?
I think I don't really have a specific opinion. I'm just noting that what's happening when you're allocating capital in channels is that you're predicting the future. You're predicting where capital needs to be in the future. And that's why it's hard to automate that task. And that's why it's hard to correctly allocate, because Bitcoins are scarce. They're so scarce. And you only have so many that you can allocate. So once there becomes contention for that resource, there needs to be a market process. And we have the market process, which is routing fees. There needs to be that market process, which is pushing you to push coins in the right place. But not only are coins need to be put in the right place in the beginning, the market is constantly updating. Where coins need to be placed is constantly changing. So the whole network itself needs to be a marketplace, and it already is. That's already how Lightning works.
Okay, Justin, can you articulate your thoughts? And then, John, I want to ask you to do the same.
So in my opinion, all it is a model where there can be more than one participant, and there's the open option to swap off-chain to on-chain through many different entities. It doesn't have to be through one node. I think the same thing will happen if tokens get added on separate Lightning networks. But you're not going to have one node offer USDT. It's going to be many different providers that offer swaps from Lightning Bitcoin to USDT. That's how I see the future.
Got it. John?
So mine would be that just philosophically, I'm trying to keep things as like thermodynamically like simple as possible, and have waste the least resources and have the least. Basically, I believe that the proper approach for forming, say, the arteries of the Lightning Network is a hub and spoke model where there are just every major player or hub, like I said, could be wallets or merchants or anybody that is actually a frequent destination or provider, that they are the major hubs and they all try to work together to be well connected with each other, because they have a lot of incentive to do so, because this is mostly where the Bitcoin is moving in actual real life economic transactions. And I see like routing optimizations as like an end tail optimization and something that you definitely want to work properly so you can reach the edges of the network without and still have reliability. But that just the general concept of inserting yourself between peers is an inefficiency from the get-go. And so if you try to perform as a pure routing node, what you'll find is that at best, you will make some money when there is inefficiency in the market, like a lack of people properly managing their channels or properly choosing their connections in the first place. But I think that you will find, and I bet you, Pete, if I ask you, have you ever summed like your behavior, the on-chain fees that you've paid versus the money you have made routing, and are you actually profitable? Most people will say no, and you're going to find maybe like a very small percentage of people like that are total pros and always like diligent that are actually making any money at all. And that as an end user, you would just be much better off in saving money by making sure you're connected with, basically, instead of trying to predict the future, you're trying to look at your own past behavior of who you transact with and make sure you're always well connected to them and that you always have some sort of way of circulating liquidity to them.
Got it. To answer your question, I have been slightly profitable over time, but my time is pretty precious and it takes a moderate amount or more than I would like to earn. We're talking dozens of dollars per month. So there are
Good
people.
job.
Yes. Yeah, I'm killing it. There are people like Alex and others who make orders of magnitude more successfully. But yeah, I agree with you that it's the average.
Yeah, like I think Alex makes good money. He has, I think, if I remember, like a living wage in some countries that he makes from his routing.
Yeah, but
I'm also sure that he's probably the king of routing, and that there's nobody doing it as well that isn't already an economic actor.
Well, he also is providing services, and so I think that
he's like the industry expert, also. You know,
I think it is correct that that not everybody will make money. I think like it'll be a specialization, and there will be overlap. Like some people who already have a lot of coins laying around, that just like lowers their cost to entry into this kind of like competitive marketplace. But there'll be other people who are like hedge funds. Like what is a hedge fund doing in their economy? It's just helping to adjust the market, and they make a lot of money. There's not that many people who can do it. You play the stock market, you're probably going to lose, but there are going to be some winners.
Got it.
I think we're in this like final round of giving some thoughts on how this routing thing works. I would agree with a lot of the things that John said, that by the end of the day, people who actually do economic activities on the network are probably in a good spot of also being routing nodes, because they probably have a certain amount of inbound and outbound liquidity anyway. Because if you're a shop or a merchant, you're going to receive some Bitcoin. Now you have some Bitcoins in your channels, but you still have inbound liquidity, right? So there's something merging around. I wouldn't go as far, though, to call it a hub and spoke topology, because what we see in social network analysis, what people do usually is they create small world networks. So there are usually very short paths between people who want to interact with each other. They don't have to be connected directly, but usually those networks are being formed in a very dense population. And I think this is also...
What's the correct term? Because I'm not trying... I know spoke just means one in the center and everybody connected to it. But what's the term for like multiple hubs and spokes where you have like...
Isn't it federated?
Is it distributed? Or...
I think what you're looking for is something like what's Strogat's model, but I would still argue that's not what we're searching for. And honestly, everything that we see on the Lightning Network looks much more like a typical small world network. The stuff that you see as the social graph on Facebook, all these like typical power law distributions of node degrees, they just tend to have very good and strong topological properties. I think one of the reasons why the LND Autopilot initially created the Barabasi-Alba model to make suggestions to whom to connect to was especially because they create these kinds of topologies. And I think that's pretty much a mixture of between what John and Alex are both like, at least how I understood it, what they were predicting for the future. So I think we are going somewhere in this direction. Obviously, I can't tell the future, but that's just from my general feeling also on how networks in communications on the internet everywhere are being built. We humans tend to build networks in that sense. And currently on the Lightning Network over the past 3 years, we have seen exactly this kind of topology being emerging. That being said, I want to add one more thing with respect to rebalancing. I would also argue that rebalancing is a severely important topic, and I have been advocating several times in the past, and now I'm speaking to especially what Marshall said before, that developers should sometimes drop their ideas more frequently, that we need a rebalancing protocol for nodes to speak to each other, right? Because when we actually rebalance our liquidity among friends, we create a higher reliability, a higher chance for payments to go through. I was very surprised when Alex
Renee, we have one. It's called Telegram Chat. We use it all the time.
I appreciate your sense of humor there, but I think it would be better if nodes could basically automatically speak to each other and negotiate. And I was also a little bit surprised when Alex just right now admitted that there is pathfinding issues with the Loop server, because recently in an LND Twitter space he said, yeah, people are able to make large payments to the Loop server. And as we provided some answers to how to actually make larger payments with respect to that. And I think these things are coming. And yeah, I also actually agree with a lot of the stuff that John said before to Marshall. It takes time for stuff to be reviewed by fellow developer colleagues and to basically get studied and for people to decide if they want to adopt new ideas. And it's not about heavily and aggressively advertising them, but just looking at what are the good ideas, reviewing them, trying them out. And I think then people are actually smart and will make good decisions.
Okay.
And we are working on fixes for Loop. So we've identified, we definitely know that's a problem, that pathfinding is difficult, but it's like a symptom of success, that lots of easy pathfinding because the easy routes were not used. Once they get all used up, it makes pathfinding harder.
All right, so I'm going to shift topics. This has been totally awesome. I know that for everyone, this has been a highly technical conversation. Probably one of the most, maybe not one of the most, but I would say one of the most technical, lightning focused conversations we've had. I really appreciate everyone that is on stage and has come up. There's been a lot of really, I have learned a ton from this conversation. So thank you. What I want to do as we close out is let's just go around the speakers and give me the thing that you are the most excited about that is connected or that relates to the Lightning Network, and the thing that you think is the biggest issue or that, let's say, lose sleep over with regard to the Lightning Network. And let's keep them relatively concise. John, on my screen, you are immediately to the right of me, so I'd like you to start.
I need you to repeat the question, please. I was trying to respond to somebody's request to be unblocked.
Fair enough. The question was basically, what is the thing that you are the most excited about, or you think is the most, well, let's just say that you're excited about in terms of the Lightning Network going forward into the future? And what is the thing that you think is the largest threat to the Lightning Network, or something that you lose sleep over? But again, always related to the Lightning Network.
So I would say this might be a little bit weird, but I'll say it anyway, since it will be a different answer than maybe what other people would say. The thing I'm most excited about with the Lightning Network is actually like the future of businesses interacting with Lightning protocol developers and implementations, basically developing relationships on a business development level with Lightning Labs, with C Lightning and Blockstream, and trying to see like where we can take the future for users and like beyond just on the protocol level. Development in the future for like features and prioritization of things for the protocol. Example would be like, there's been a lot more talk now after pushing for it about speccing ZeroConf, about getting splicing in, about making offers a real thing. And so I'm excited for all of this kind of cultural, evolution that we've had on that level. Things I lose sleep over or such, I don't know. I'm not really so worried about anything huge with the Lightning Network. I don't know. I guess I can think of one. I lose sleep a little bit over the fact that because Lightning is actually peer-to-peer, that we will suffer and are exposed to some regulation that could be bad for us. And because we have to use our actual like computers and connect to each other, that makes us like identifiable in a way and thus potentially censorable in a way. And so I'm a little bit scared of like regulators learning how Lightning works and starting to apply regulations to it.
Got it. Great answer. Alex, you are immediately after Alex, or rather John. What are you most excited about, and what do you think is an attack vector or lead you sleep over?
I guess they're similar. The thing that I'm most excited about is that anybody over the world can enter into a Bitcoin native economy. And we have that with routing nodes, but I think that's only the start of what we can have. It's like people having a business where they're making Bitcoin and spending Bitcoin, and I think that is something that we can really expand upon. We can just have people coming full circle in areas of their lives that can be anywhere in the world. So expanding the set of things that people can do is definitely something I'm very interested in, and that kind of ties into what I'm worried about, which is that I'm worried that in the specification process or in just thinking about things that we're not really thinking about the worst case scenarios, that we're not really hardening the network, we give a lot of guff to other coins, other chains, and they didn't think about this systemic risk. I think that's also a problem for us. We have to think about systemic risk. Something could come along and take advantage of a long-standing vulnerability or problem in what we've designed, and by the time that we get to that, we're so dependent on it that it's difficult for us to overcome it.
Got it. Makes sense. Justin, give us your thoughts.
Yeah. So for me, the thing I am excited about is more bridges being built by exchanges. Honestly, I'm a bit disappointed that it hasn't happened a lot more. I mean, it's pretty easy to integrate Lightning. I'm not sure why Kraken hasn't done it, Coinbase, or any other exchanges. It's a bit disappointing. And why I'm excited about that is because you're creating bridges into many other countries that accept Lightning. One of them, like El Salvador, other countries. And as for the largest threat, maybe I would say privacy. I think a lot more work needs to be done to improve the privacy of sending Lightning payments and receiving them. I know, for example, Moon has a tech to change the destination public key, but if there's regulations imposed on them where they still have to say, oh, it's going to this node, it's pretty worthless. It's only exchanges that wouldn't know. So for me, that's the largest threat. But I think they can be fixed and improve them.
Good stuff. Renee, you're up.
Yeah, Pete, you always encourage us to say why we're awesome, so I have to use this to show this. I'm really excited about optimal payment flows and the things that are emerging around them. Just today on the Lightning Dev mailing list, Zeman opened a thread where unfortunately he misunderstood a slightly point, but he still made a very good argument that we should think about making the payment transport of HTLCs more natural fitting together with flows instead of paths by making something like local splitting and local merging of HTLCs. I think this is an excellent opportunity. In the same sense, however, my biggest fear is, and I'm going to publish a post soon on our mainnet test that we did with the payment flows, stuck HTLCs, and I think many other people have mentioned them before. They are a real problem. If a Lightning node is just not forwarding an HTLC, it basically interrupts the entire payment process. And especially when you do larger payments and you have more nodes involved, this is really a problem. And we don't have a good solution unless we have PTLCs. And even with PTLCs, I would argue the solutions are not too great because the liquidity is still basically gone as long as the time lock is expired or as long as you can't really cancel the payment fully. Yeah, this is really an issue, and I hope we find good solutions to them.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Nadav, what do you got?
I guess the things I'm most excited about aren't the most exciting things. I'll just preface with that, but I'm excited by some things that affect fewer people, but I guess I'm generally excited about the introduction of new kind of expressibility and all the stuff Renee is doing, and just this super cool, unique, cutting edge of kind of the technology and all the stuff surrounding it that is entering and letting us use Bitcoin closer to how I imagine it should be, where you're maximally utilizing cooperation using a block. As for the Lightning related thing,
Nadav, I'm not sure if we're cutting out on your end or on mine.
Oh no.
I think it's your end. I can hear.
Okay, perfect. Nadav, please continue.
Sucks, B. But scary things. I think Renee stole mine in some. No, not really. But just spam resistance is, in my mind, a big barrier that Lightning needs to overcome. Where, right now, things aren't necessarily as trustless as they could or should be, and I think when we have ways of dealing with spam, that'll actually open the doors to a lot of new use cases. Until we have ways of dealing with that, it's just, I hope no one 10x's, or I guess it's 20x's their liquidity to lock up my neighborhood of the network kind of deal.
Got it. Vivek, give us your thoughts.
All right. Yeah, I sleep over two things. It's not death and taxes. It's John Carvalho cyberbullying me about Liquid, and then also having a low BOS score. It's been very difficult, and that's why the thing I care about most is liquidity ads, so it'll help me. I really struggle with this routing thing, and I hope I can improve.
Those are reasonable fears. I support you.
I think we overpowered Ben with all of our fears.
Yeah, he just disappeared like tears in the rain. Shinobi, you only gave us one comment, but you're still on stage, and I would love to hear you scream at me about something.
Okay, idiot.
I do my best.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess what I'm most excited about with Lightning is the potential of post-Taproot changes, specifically the ability to blend funding outputs into the anonymity set of everything and bury non-cooperative clauses under a Taproot tree. But also, I think a very under-discussed aspect of Taproot and how Lightning can change is Jonas Nick's proposal for Schnorr-based ring signatures. so that instead of having to explicitly dox your funding output as a routing node, that would allow you to hide in some kind of anonymity set which output on chain is actually yours, but still provide some kind of proof that you actually have funds that you can route with, so that it's not a huge denial of service vector where people are trying to route payments through nodes that don't really have money. Honestly, fear-wise, I'm worried that Lightning is rushing ahead to integrate into businesses and actual uses too fast. We have channel designs like asymmetric channel constructs, which each party has a totally different set of transactions versus the other side. There's already a proposal for a symmetric channel design right now that is, since the paper for it was written, hasn't gone anywhere. So there's already new ways that we could structure payment channels that are more efficient in certain places, but everybody's rushing to integrate what's implemented now into so many things that like no real progress is being made at potential optimizations or different structures for things. And I feel like the faster Lightning starts integrating into actual businesses and use cases, the more progress towards those improvements itself will actually keep slowing down, because that's its own type of ossification in the same way that we have consensus ossification in the chain. And so I'm worried that it grows too fast and it kneecaps itself to a very slow pace of improvement.
I love it.
Sorry, I have to say one thing before we stop. Can you please share the post from Jonas Nick about the ring signature stuff?
Oh, yes.
I totally missed it. And if you could just tweet this out, I'd be awesome to just tweet this. Thank you.
I'm going to have to go dig through things. I don't know if I can share it in this space, but I will definitely tweet it out after it's done.
Yeah, please do. That would be awesome. All right, everyone. I really appreciate everyone joining. Yeah, this was a great space. Tune in on Wednesday.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, and then next week, we'll be back to Lightning on Monday. Y'all are amazing.
Thanks for having us on.
Until next week. Adios, everyone.
See you, sir.